Eren and Lindsay both opened their eyes wide in surprise. He broke out in a cold sweat and stammered. Looking at the beautiful girls standing in a row, smiling sweetly before him, Eren continued to be confused and said, yes. Seeing their excited and hopeful expressions, Eren couldn't believe his eyes and asked, choose one of them. His voice was somewhat incredulous. To become my bride? Helene smiled gently, her eyes tenderly looking at Eren. She looked at him and replied, that's right, it is your responsibility as a Pendragon. She continued to explain this tradition to Eren. It is an age-old tradition, Eren. After the oath with the dragon was established, neighboring nobles sent women here to create an heir for the Pendragon family. She turned to look at Luna and said, originally Luna from the Sarid family was supposed to come here. The engagement was called off. Hearing Helena mention her, Luna gently looked back. Upon hearing this, Eren couldn't hold back her tears, covering her face with her hands and sobbing. Oh, why could Sister Luna cancel the engagement so pitifully? Seeing Eren like this, Eren looked at her with a puzzled expression. He wondered to himself, did that really happen? Lindsay, standing next to him, noticed Eren making that face, and she just glanced at him without saying anything. After crying, Eren regained her composure, happily smiling with crescent-shaped eyes as she said to Eren, but just stay calm, brother, because everyone here comes from families that are just as prestigious as the Sarid clan. Eren gestured towards the young ladies standing nearby. One lady with dark red hair arrogantly spoke up. Ha ha ha, that's right. I come from the Papalsuki clan, the descendants of the first emperor, which means my lineage is even more noble than that of the royal family. As she spoke, she fanned herself with a feather fan to show her nobility. Another young lady introduced her family. My family has a general of the Royal Army, someone who can mobilize soldiers at any time. Violence is the greatest power in the world. Hearing this, the young lady with golden hair adorned with diamonds mockingly said to the other lady, how foolish. The future will be built by those who can grasp the economy. Money is everything. Suddenly, the red-haired lady rushed at the wealthy lady and shouted, a merchant like you shouldn't be here. The scene at this moment looked incredibly chaotic. Seeing this, Eren and Lindsay could only stand with their arms crossed and watch. Suddenly, Eren became serious, frowning with annoyance. Noticing his discomfort, Helene hurriedly said, listen, Eren, this is. He interrupted her and asked, do I have to choose from the people in this room? Helene replied, hearing that, Eren emphasized his question again. So just from the people in this room? His question puzzled Helene and Lindsay. Helene looked down, flustered, and said, this is how the Pendragon family does things. Eren wouldn't let her continue, he said. I understand now. Eren parted his lips and said, well, I choose Lindsay to be my concubine. He placed his hand on Lindsay's shoulder and spoke with a very calm expression. Eren's words surprised Lindsay, who widened her eyes and froze for several seconds. Helene and Eren were also startled, standing motionless. They couldn't believe what they had just heard. The young ladies who were fighting also stopped, glaring at Eren with furious glares. Lindsay looked up at Eren. The scene was completely different from before. It was no longer noisy, but had become very quiet. Lindsay spoke up, huh? Just as Lindsay was about to say something, Eren quickly covered her mouth. This action made her embarrassed, her face turning red, and she could only mumble. Eren covered her mouth while holding Lindsay's waist to keep her still. He closed his eyes and calmly said, ignoring Lindsay's awkwardness and desire to speak but being unable to, calm down, Lindsay. She always takes care of the child, and when she went on an adventure, she was covered in soot. Eren continued, you have been enchanted by that courage and made a mistake in Barinto. You have to take responsibility for that. At this point, Lindsay was so embarrassed that her face turned as red as a tomato, and she could only scream inside without being able to do anything. Eren hugged Lindsay in his arms and apologized. I'm sorry for staying silent until now. Hearing Eren's apology, everyone present at that moment was surprised, their eyes wide and mouths agape, staring at the two. Helene, not yet understanding what was happening, reached out to Eren and awkwardly said, huh? Helene began to panic. Anyway, you are a man. It's okay. Because a surprised voice exclaimed, is it really okay? She tried to explain, but the true meaning behind this tradition was, Helene's worry and panic caused Eren, who was behind her, to panic as well. Helene continued to speak to ensure the continuity and sustainability of the family. Eren looked at Helene and frowned, saying, I understand. Lindsay was so embarrassed that she was sweating all over, glancing at Eren. Suddenly, Eren glanced at those young ladies and emphasized, however, those women only heard about your oath with the dragon and came to attend the celebration. His words confused the young ladies, leaving them bewildered. Eren's expression darkened, and he continued, once the oath was made, they flocked in, but when we are in a difficult time, do they really want to cooperate with us? He stood with his hands on his hips, looking disdainfully at the young ladies and continued, but the one who has been by my side for 3 years without any ulterior motives is Lindsay. Eren's last words made Lindsay blush with embarrassment, staring at him. At that moment, in response to Eren's words, Lindsay felt so shy that her mind became foggy. She no longer knew what was happening. The young ladies, fearing they might lose a delicious opportunity, looked at Eren with dissatisfaction and said, "But she is just a maid." Eren looked at them with a frightening gaze. In a slightly cold voice, he said, "That doesn't mean anything to me. Those who rely on the reputation of their family are just fools." Eren's words left the group frozen in place. They were so shocked that their mouths hung open. Eren continued speaking, while Helene and Eren were worried about what he would say next. Eren smiled and said, "I already have companions, the ones who have helped us all this time, Killian and his soldiers." Images of Killian and his soldiers appeared in Eren's mind. Eren went on, "The unparalleled Ancona orcs, the Khazal elves, and the Tata harpies." Images of them laughing together flashed in Eren's mind. He proudly puffed out his chest and said, "They accompany me to the tomb without fear. I trust them. They are my teammates." Eren gently took Helene's hand and continued, "Pendragon has become weak by relying on allies, hasn't he, mother?" Hearing this, Helene and Eren were so happy that tears welled in their eyes. Lindsay also wore a cheerful expression as she looked at him. Eren turned to Lindsay and gently asked, "And what about you, Lindsay? Will you become my concubine?" Hearing this, Lindsay felt shy and recoiled backward, while Helene became so joyful that she burst into tears. Eren, standing behind her, was extremely excited, and the other young ladies were still frozen in shock, wide-eyed at the scene before them. When Eren asked for her opinion, Lindsay felt happy. She trembled and tears were about to spill over. She stammered in response to Eren, "Of course, young master." Seeing that Lindsay had agreed, Eren took her hand and shouted loudly, "So from today, Maid Lindsay has become the bride of the Pendragon family." A short while later, Eren left the room. A voice echoed, "Truly a magnificent sight." Asia Pendragon slowly walked into the room. Hearing her words, Eren remained calm, sitting with his eyes closed, looking very graceful and elegant. Asia placed her hand on her face, tilted her head to look at Eren, and said, "I thought you were just an untrained soldier, but perhaps that is truly your intention." Upon hearing this, he only snorted coldly. Eren asked, "Are you still here even though the tomb has been opened?" Asia clasped her hands behind her back and replied calmly, "I wanted to see the face of my descendant one last time before I leave." Asia turned to face Eren, her face still wearing a smile full of implications. "You changed since the first time I met you." Asia walked closer to the window and said, "However, moving forward without allies won't be easy this time." Eren suddenly stood up and said, "I have a plan." Asia glanced at Eren with curiosity, wondering what his plan was. Eren crossed his arms and paced back and forth as he walked. He spoke, "The Pendragon clan has regained the power of the dragons, and many people want to invest in us and meet Raven." He flashed a cunning smile and continued, "We want to acquire those who will become heroes in the future." Eren's plan astonished Asia. His expression turned sinister. He said, "If I can turn them into loyal subjects from the moment they are still nameless, we can create a powerful army both domestically and abroad." Asia began to grasp the idea. She turned back to look at Eren and said, "I see. So if you have that intention." Atia eagerly walked over, grabbing Eren's arm tightly and said, "Are you aiming for the throne?" Her action left Eren stunned. He looked at Asia with annoyance and said, "Don't touch me, ghost." Despite his disdain, Atia eagerly asked, "Can I hug you?" Hearing that, Eren contemptuously replied, "Get lost." She released him, clasped her hands behind her back, looked out the window and said, "I was just joking. Now I have no regrets." Eren crossed his arms and leaned against the wall. Hearing what Asia said, he remained silent. After a moment, Eren finally spoke. "The 6 dragons have arrived at the time I am forming a pact with Sol." Asia suddenly turned around and asked to be sure, "Have the other dragons arrived?" Eren calmly replied, "Yes." Eren continued to recount. The Black Dragon mentioned something about the Dragon God and the Demon God. From what I gathered from the conversation, there seems to be a reason behind my reincarnation as Eren. He recalled the first time he entered this body. Eren continued, "Baltai also said that everything is interconnected." Asia looked at him and asked what was on her mind. "This is the first time I've heard about the dragon and demon gods. Did Soldrake say anything about this?" He tiredly waved his hand and said, "Time will answer." That's all she said. Asia smiled and said to him, "You seem quite close to him, don't you?" She extended her hand towards him and added, "You just called him Sol." Hearing Asia's words, a look of surprise appeared on Eren's face. He closed his eyes and helplessly said, "She told me to call him that. She's the only one." He looked up at Asia and said, "I can talk about these things." Suddenly, Asia gradually faded away before Eren's eyes. She wore a gentle smile, looking at her still visible hand. Eren widened his eyes in surprise at this scene. Eren exclaimed, bewildered, "Hey." As she had turned back to him, her eyes brimming with tears, she offered him a comforting smile and said, "Now I must go." Aishida's shining tears slowly fell. He panicked and called her name, but could only cry out, "Hey." She turned towards Eren, smiling with a tender expression, and said, "Whether you are Raven's target or Eren's, I completely believe you will be able to achieve it." She could no longer maintain her initial expression. Her eyes began to cry as she spoke to Eren, "My dear Pendragon." Grandmother's hand touched Eren's face. He looked at her in surprise. He intended to say her name, but hesitated and called, "Grandmother." Eren lunged forward and hugged her tightly. This caught her a bit off guard. But at the next moment, she smiled with a face that had fulfilled her wish. She also hugged him, her hand becoming more transparent, advising him, "From now on, just keep moving forward, Eren Pendragon." After Ravenveld finished speaking, her body completely vanished into thin air. Eren stood there in a daze. He looked up at her portrait, promising, "I will definitely make it Atia." In the year 314 of the Imperial calendar, Eren Pendragon and Lindsay Conrad got married. The two held their wedding in front of hundreds of people below. Eren sat in a dark room, looking down thoughtfully. A sudden voice rang out from the window. "So you have chosen that girl, my contract follower." Eren looked toward the source of the voice. A girl with white wings appeared beside the window. He spoke up, Sol. He looked at her with a somewhat displeased expression and replied, "You know the reason behind that party." Sol stood at the door and continued, "That's right, however. Why did you choose the maid?" He propped his chin with an awkward expression and spoke, "If I marry someone arranged for me, I will have to participate in many obligations. It would be hard for me to act. And regarding the hair, it doesn't matter who I do it with. It's better just to get it done." Sol tilted her head towards him, her eyes perplexed, and replied, "So you have no interest in her at all?" Eren narrowed his eyes, still resting his chin on his hand, and said with a gloomy expression, "She has taken care of Eren, who is slowly dying for 3 years. I trust her." He leaned back onto the bed, looked up at Sol, and asked her, "By the way, where have you been? You just suddenly flew away like that." Sol sat on the windowsill and replied, "Rie." He asked again, "Rie." Sol recounted, "On the cliff behind the castle, there is a statue of a dragonstone. That is where I lived after swearing to the Pendragon family." Eren glanced over and replied, "Isn't it very boring there?" She looked up at the sky and said, "It's the same anywhere. After all, no one can hear my voice." He questioned back, "The Pendragon Lord can hear it, though." She looked into the distance and said, "I have never spoken to Pendragon until now, nor did Gordon or his ancestors, Klein." He was surprised by her words. Sol continued, "They never wanted me to take on this form, so out of respect for their wishes, I have always stayed in Rie." Eren recalled what his grandmother had said earlier. "You are really close to her." He began to remember the images from their first meeting. The first time, Sol arrogantly said to him, "You really talk a lot." The second time, she sat in the tree and said, "It's rare for anyone from the Pendragon family to want to talk to me." The third time, at the party, Sol sat on the balcony. Eren approached and asked, "Aren't you coming to the party?" She replied, "Anyway, no one can hear my voice." He looked at her, thinking to himself, has she always been like this for centuries? She closed her eyes, bowed her head, and said, "But whether it is Eren or Raven, you are still my contract bearer." He abruptly called out, "Sol." She turned to look, and he continued, "I can't get used to how you call me." He looked up seriously and said, "You can call me whatever you want, except that." She looked at Eren in surprise. Sol moved her lips. "So." Sol looked straight at him, answering, "Ray, we will call you Ray." Hearing her call, he hesitated. Remembering back to the days when he was still Raven, there was someone who would pat his head and call him Ray. Eren sat in deep thought, silently reflecting on his brother. Seeing this, Sol asked again, "Ray, do you not like it?" Eren replied, "No." He looked up and smiled happily. "I actually really like it. From now on, you can call me that." She was surprised by his expression. Her mouth twitched slightly. Sol looked at him, smiling joyfully. "You are truly very different, Ray. Completely unlike any Pendragon before." Eren also looked back at her. Sol bowed her head, her face full of happiness. She thought to herself, "Alex." Sol turned towards the back, looking at the night sky, continuing with her thoughts. "The first Pendragon seems to. Your promise will finally be fulfilled." The next day, wings were soaring in the sky. Around its neck, he carried a paper bag. A bird flew everywhere, scattering newspapers across every place. The newspaper contained the following message. The Pendragon clan once again makes a pact with dragons. This information quickly reached people throughout the Empire. One person picked up a newspaper and read aloud, "The Pendragon clan, that's impressive." Barrio, seated on a horse, looked over at Reed and said, "They have a territory comparable to a small empire. However, they only have 5 knights." Reed replied, If all goes well, we could acquire some land and also gain nobility. Both turned around at the same time and asked, "What do you think, young man?" Valis, wearing a purple cloak with a hood covering his face, looked at the two. The scene shifted to another location where the sun had set and dusk was beginning to fall. The sunset light streamed through the room. A person sat reading the newspaper saying, not only dragons, but also demons and Ancona Orc are following him. He rested his chin on the arm of the chair, droplets of water falling from his face, and added, "Eren Pendragon, I'm quite interested in you." This time, the newspaper made its way to the castle. The king shouted that Eren made a pact with dragons. This is. He questioned the two below. So are we not just a bunch of clowns? I can't even sleep now. Luna's face was worried as she looked at him. She replied, "Father." She bent down, hearing news about Eren, feeling a bit happy, secretly thinking, Eren. The scene shifted to another dark place, a hand wielding dark magic. The newspaper fell into their hands, and one person spoke up, Eren Pendragon. Arangis looked at the newspaper, laughed, touched his face, and asked, "So now we want to create..." The man in the black cloak took the newspaper, let it fall, and repeated Arangis's words. "So now we want to create." He used his hand to set the newspaper on fire, adding, "The person is a nuisance." The newspaper was completely buried in the flames. Baltai took a bite of meat and replied, "Then let me handle that." The two of them turned to look at him, smiling dangerously. The man in the black cloak addressed him, "I've always been waiting for you, mad dog of the Empire, demon general." Tuvan Baltai. He leaned back against a wolf that was wrapped around him. His face became more distorted. Lindsay, along with two maidens behind her, bowed to bid farewell to Eren. "Take care, Lord Eren," she said. He tied his hair back with both hands, a hair tie held in his mouth, and replied, I'm off now." Lindsay, her ears flushed red, shyly asked, "Where are you going this time?" He finished tying his hair, looked at her, smiled, and answered, "To the Bellin Gate to recruit more soldiers for the Pendragon clan." At the Bellin City Gate, there was a small town that was somewhat dilapidated. Killian angrily shouted, "You! Where is your spirit from before? It's only been an hour and you're already in such a state." The faces of the soldiers were all pale, sweat streaming down, but still holding your swords. Killian stood before them, holding a wooden sword, and continued to yell, "If so, then you are not worthy of being knights of the Pendragon clan." Hearing this, the soldiers panicked, practicing their sword moves up and down, in unison. "We obey." Eren stepped forward, praising him. "Well done, Killian." He also became serious, placing his hand on his chest, replied, "Yes, my lord." He continued to ask, "How is the recruitment of new soldiers going?" He sighed and answered, "Oh dear, in this day and age, those who want to become knights are all talk and no action." Eren looked at him and added, "The recruitment of so many soldiers in such a short time is quite impressive. It's normal for quantity to compensate for quality." He smiled approvingly. "And your job is to train them, isn't it, Commander?" Struck by lightning, the man's face was filled with happiness. Killian turned back, excitedly speaking to the soldiers. "Did you hear that? Did you hear what the Lord just said? He has high hopes for you. If you're expected to do so much, then you must train hard, even if it feels like you're going to die. Show him that under my command, you can become true Pendragon knights." The soldiers' faces turned angry, panting heavily and whispering among themselves. The one with brown hair spoke up. No matter how good his skills are, the one in the middle added, "That's ridiculous. This mustached guy just yells whenever he likes." The one on the edge criticized too. "Isn't he the one who was completely defeated by the Lord, even if he is a top knight?" Eren leaned against a tree, watching Killian command, smiling and thinking. Things have been happening this way lately. The concentration of soldiers has only excited one person, and the long-awaited night team has finally been formed. He also remembered the moment when he was still Raven and was defeated by a demon god. A thought raced through his mind. The dragon god and the demon god are all related. The moment he encountered the dragon god, there was the presence of both the dragon god and the demon god. What the six dragons did made his expression more contemplative. His train of thought continued, "There are still no signs for my enemy, but reinforcing the legion won't hurt." Cardo was fighting with the soldiers, yawning widely. With a light swipe, one soldier fell down. The other two were also terrified. He turned to Mia, who was sleeping on the leg of a monster, and continued to think, in preparation for the battle that will come someday. Eren looked up at the top of the castle and saw a few griffins flying above it. The griffins were circling around Sol. He thought to himself, Sol has left her lair and come to me. Clearly those griffins are Sol's family. Eren looked up and somehow she appeared happier than ever. His thoughts continued, it must be so, right? At that moment, Sol suddenly looked up at the sky. Then, as if noticing something, she looked down. Sol immediately spoke to him with her thoughts. "Hey, Ray." Eren replied, "What is it, Sol?" She answered, "There are nights The knights have arrived. Outside the city gate, 3 knights rode in. Killian went to greet them. 2 of them smiled at him. The other soldiers began to whisper about them. The brown-haired one spoke up. Oh, they're the free knights. The black-haired one asked, free knights? The brown-haired one looked at them and explained. They are veterans who have experienced many battles. They travel the world relying solely on their weapons and skills. The black-haired boy looked at him in surprise. That sounds cool. The brown-haired one continued, surely they have heard about the rebirth of the Pendragon family and have come to enlist. The commander introduced himself. I am the commander of the White Dragon Legion of the Pendragon family, Mark Killian. Where do you come from? The armored knight stood up to introduce himself first. We are free knights from Evandel. I am Reed Pollock, seeking to serve a ruler with both virtue and talent. The bald man also introduced himself. I am Barrio Lutton. What I seek is a place where I can truly showcase my skills, whether it is in a duel or a real battle. Killian replied, I see. He then turned to look at a person completely covered from head to toe and asked, what about you? Reed glanced over as well. He didn't look at Killian's face, just replied casually, I'll let your family know who I am. I have no name. Killian was taken aback. Barrio laughed loudly, looking down at him and said, ha ha, don't pay attention to him. He's always like that. We don't even know his name. Reed explained, we met him not long ago and he is accompanying us because it seems the 3 of us are heading to the same place. The 2 soldiers behind and Killian had helpless expressions. He replied, I understand. So you must be here because you want to become soldiers of the Pendragon clan. Barrio placed his hands on his hips, speaking proudly about his strength. That's right. After all, the Pendragon clan currently lacks a decent commander. Reed added, with our skills, you all will be able to strengthen your forces and we will hold wealth and power in our hands. 2 people argued over speaking advice. You won't need to temporarily rely on a powerful but ineffective army anymore. There's no need to try to recruit more soldiers. Killian's face turned red with anger, and the 2 soldiers behind him were also fuming with rage. Eren appeared from behind, holding a sword, and spoke. Well, this is interesting. All 4 turned to look. He casually walked over, holding a sword in one hand while the other was tucked in his pocket, and continued. A Knight of Freedom relies solely on their own skills. As long as their skills are good enough, their attitude doesn't matter. He called out, Master. The man in the cloak paid no attention, looking elsewhere. Eren said seriously, but they must be strong enough first. Eren pointed his sword at Killian. Fight them, Killian. Everyone looked at him. Killian smiled broadly, excitedly saying, at your command. Barrio immediately drew his sword and swung it at him. Killian quickly blocked it, and Barrio laughed loudly. Ha ha ha, I like this. The 2 soldiers watched the fight in surprise. The black-haired one spoke. Your leader is quite clever. The brown-haired one worried. Is he? Hey, will that mustachioed guy be all right? His opponent is strong and looks tough. Barrio's face smiled self-satisfiedly, while Killian's face was very serious with a hint of anger. In one swift move, he cut Barrio's sword away. He was furious, his hand trembling as his sword was knocked aside. Seeing him lose, Reed suddenly panicked and shouted, What? Killian raised his sword towards Reed provocatively. Are you going to fight? He, with a face filled with both anger and worry, drew his sword. Reed swung at him, and Killian blocked the sword. The 2 techniques collided, creating a strong gust of wind. Reed's face grew increasingly fearful, while Killian was very excited. The 2 swords clashed against each other. Reed's hand could not hold onto the sword, and it was knocked away. As the sword fell, Killian also pointed his sword at his throat. The soldiers around cheered. The dark-haired and brown-haired ones exclaimed, He's really impressive. That guy with the mustache is that strong. Killian turned to Eren, winking as he said, What are their skills like, Master? He assessed and then commented, Well, they're not weak. We're short on manpower, so we could recruit them. The 2 losers looked dejected, showing their dismay. The purple-cloaked figure stood silently in one place, not saying anything. Eren turned to ask him, Hey, aren't you going to join in? He simply replied, Not interested. Killian and the soldiers were startled by the man's attitude. They thought to themselves, Does Daguerre speak so casually to the master? He looked up, smiled, and asked him, Don't say that. What's your name? His eyes had barely met Eren's as he repeated that statement. I will make your household know who I am. I have no name. His attitude completely infuriated Killian. His eyes widened as he shouted, You bastard. He rushed forward, grabbing the collar of his shirt, yelling, How dare you speak like that to the master? What the hell is this? He didn't pay Killian any mind at all. With both hands, he easily flipped Killian over. Killian fell to the ground, and the soldiers were astonished by what had just happened. Killian's expression also showed immense confusion. Everyone exclaimed in surprise, What just happened? The commander grabbed him, but how did he get thrown out? Only Eren continued to smile. He thought to himself, Just as I thought, this guy is very strong. His expression was full of excitement, but tinged with a bit of worry. He thought to himself, I want to have him at all costs. To his capabilities, he didn't care, only looking down a roll of his sleeves. At that moment, he finally looked up. Eren excitedly smiled, thinking to himself, just as I thought, this guy is very strong. Looking at Elkin casually adjusting his sleeve after defeating Mark, Eren resolutely decided in his mind, I want to have him at any cost within my abilities. After adjusting his clothes, Elkin lifted his head to the sky with a calm expression, as if nothing could affect him. Seeing Elkin calmly say nothing like that, Mark was utterly stunned. Then he shouted in frustration, this jerk. At that moment, Eren's voice interrupted, stop it, Killian. Under Elkin's scrutinizing gaze, Eren drew his sword. He frowned, positioned the sword loosely on his shoulder, ready to defend himself, and said firmly, I will be his next opponent. The training ground suddenly fell eerily silent after Eren's words. Elkin looked doubtfully at the person before him and asked, you will fight me, will you? Noticing the doubt in the eyes of the person opposite, Eren slightly tilted his head and questioned, you don't want to fight a brat, do you? Just as he asked, Elkin truly did not want to do that, so he glanced away and didn't respond. The gleaming tip of Eren's sword pointed forward. He calmly aimed the sword at Elkin, causing him to flinch. Eren firmly said to Elkin, let's fight one-on-one. Standing in front and pointing his sword at the opponent was a sign requesting a duel with the Knights of Valvasright. Upon hearing this phrase, Elkin immediately frowned, but he maintained his silence, casting his eyes elsewhere. Meanwhile, Mark was taken aback. Knights of Valvas? The person next to him quickly asked, what is that, Commander? According to Mark, the image of the gallant Valvas knights fighting bravely emerged. In the distant southern land, a land of war and continuous conflict, the large and small territories were adjacent to each other. Valvas, knights were the local term to refer to the knights from that place. Then a Valvas warrior stood over all the defeated enemies after fighting bravely. Mark continued to praise these knights. The knights raised in that land of war possessed skills equivalent to thousands of warriors. They become sharp swords serving their masters, swords unafraid of death. That is exactly who they are. He raised his head with admiration and said to the two people next to him, in this field, there's no way to know more than through rumors. This is also the first time I've seen one of them. But looking at Eren calmly pointing his sword in challenge to Elkin, Mark muttered to himself, how, master? As if to answer his question, Eren smiled, thinking to himself, I recognized it at a glance. Eren looked at Elkin and silently observed his unique outfit, his southern accent, and that he wielded two swords, one long and one short. He recalled his past life memories when he was Raven, which were similar to the knights in Valvas he had faced when he traveled to the south in his previous life. Eren also paid attention to Elkin's horse, which was equipped with many weapons for combat, including a mace and a shield hanging from the saddle. The other side of the horse was also adorned with long-range weapons, including a crossbow. It was clear that he was a warrior ready to fight in any situation. After observing for a while, he spoke up, the cavalry of Valvas never bows their heads, except before those they consider their masters. Under Elkin's scrutinizing gaze, he calmly added, even if it is the Emperor, no one can force a Valvas cavalryman to lower his head, for they are fully confident in their own strength and skills. Still pointing his sword at him, Eren made a guess that he was sure was correct. This person comes to Pendragon, seeking a master who can make him wield his sword to the fullest. Am I right? Receiving such a straightforward question, Elkin slightly pressed his lips together. Then he looked up at the sky and replied, you are wrong. I am no longer interested in serving others. I came here only to follow the guidance of the stars. The other two were very surprised to hear this, the stars. In the astonished atmosphere and scrutinizing gazes of all three, Elkin calmly explained, I follow them because they give me water. Upon hearing that explanation, Eren seemed to understand and smiled, thinking, ah, Valvas is a person of the sea. Astrology and drinks are essential to them. He thrust the sword into the ground and said, that constellation is indeed correct, which made Elkin curious. Then Eren pointed his sword at him and calmly stated, you have been directed to me, Eren Pendragon. Elkin remained unaffected by his words. Eren's gaze darkened slightly, revealing his ambition. I want you. Hearing this, Elkin could not help but frown. He gently drew his second sword and said, cavalry of Valvas does not serve. With one sword drawn, Elkin continued to pull out the second, saying, for social status, wealth, or lineage, those worthless things. Now he held two swords in a ready position. Elkin bowed low and said tersely, if you want me, then come and take me by force. If you lose, you will die. Eren quickly assumed a perfect fighting stance and replied, I know, fighting a cavalryman is like that. Seeing that a battle was about to break out, the people around began to cheer. The man with the black beard praised, that master has a good stance. The bald man next to him added, but that sword is what mercenaries often use. Why would a young noble use it? Then Eren crouched down to leap forward. He used incredible speed to slice straight at Elkin's neck. Mark exclaimed while the others were surprised. So fast. But Elkin calmly denied that in his mind. Slow. He easily used one hand to block the attack. The two swords, one from a cavalryman and one from a mercenary, clashed. Elkin quickly pressed down on Eren's sword and pulled him down to the ground. Then he swiftly aimed with his other hand straight at Eren. But when the sword lunged forward, it struck only air. This caught Elkin by surprise, causing his eyes to widen. Not letting him be surprised for long, Eren quickly countered, delivering a strike to Elkin. Although he deftly dodged it, he still suffered a minor injury. Eren also received a cut on his face that he couldn't evade. The two then fought fiercely. After exchanging moves, they separated, leaving dust and smoke swirling around. Everyone who could keep up with the speed of the match gasped in astonishment. The man with the black beard exclaimed, "What just happened? They're so fast, I didn't catch anything at all." The blue-haired guy quickly turned to ask Mark, "What just happened, Commander?" It seemed he also didn't understand. Pale-faced, he replied, Eren, after injuring Elkin, nodded and said, "I missed my strike. My victory card usually works well against dual wielders." He calmly recalled the moment and explained, "When you knocked me off balance with the small sword on the left, at that moment, I attacked your back with a spinning slash, and yet you immediately retaliated, aiming for my head." Saying that, she touched the still bleeding wound on his face and remarked, "And you are really strong." Being hid made Elkin much more vigilant. He asked tersely, "Who are you? Are you really the son of some noble?" Contrary to his usual demeanor, Eren provided a different answer. "I am just like you." This statement left Elkin puzzled. Eren looked down, speaking in the somber tone of someone experienced. "I've killed many monsters and people." Elkin's gaze at him gradually changed. Eren continued to honestly admit, "We don't kill indiscriminately, it's just about survival." He skeptically asked back, "Have you done that?" He didn't hesitate to reply, "Yeah." Then Eren tilted his head, his dark eyes saying, "You exude a similar scent." Immediately, Elkin's eyes widened in surprise. He finally smiled, a smile full of provocation. Then Elkin picked up his two swords. The people around were astonished. Mark stammered, "What happened?" Seeing that his opponent had taken a serious fighting stance, Eren also prepared himself and asked, "Are you finally willing to use both hands? Have you finally decided to fight seriously?" Elkin was now extremely excited, looking at his opponent and laughing maniacally. Eren then asked, "The outburst of the nameless Valvas?" Karda yawned loudly. Karda, with a judgmental expression, sighed, "Gee, it's so noisy. How can I sleep properly like this?" Cradle beside him closed his eyes and laughed, saying, "Maybe it's just fighting or something like that, kid. Hee hee." Then all three of them, including Karda, Cradle, and Mia, went to the practice field together. Karda rubbed his head and asked, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" Without waiting for Mark to reply, all three of them froze at what they saw. Karda exclaimed in confusion, "Ha." At that moment, Eren and Elkin were fiercely battling at supersonic speed, making Karda wonder, what is happening? Elkin continuously pressured Eren with his sword, making it difficult for him to defend. Suddenly, Elkin noticed something, laughing maliciously. Eren also tilted his head to look in the direction Elkin was observing with a cautious expression. Cradle, while balancing Maya on his head, wondered aloud, "This is surprising. He is as strong as the master. Who exactly is that swordsman?" Mark focused on the battle and replied to him, "I want to know that too." Back in the fight, Eren decisively swung his sword straight at Elkin, but he easily blocked it with his own sword. Unfortunately, that was a bait for Eren's next attack, which startled Elkin. Seeing this scene, everyone cheered with excitement. A feint. That's impressive. The two swords clashed against each other once again, creating an immense force. Eren's attack was just in time blocked by Elkin. At that moment, Mark rushed to yell, "No, the other sword." He anxiously called out, "Master." At the same time, Elkin ferociously thrust the remaining sword towards him. Eren certainly wouldn't let him achieve his goal. He somersaulted in midair to dodge the strike. Then, while still in the air, Eren swung his sword, and Elkin quickly spun around. When Eren struck down, he easily avoided it. A missed swing had no effect on Eren, who calmly landed on the ground. As Eren ran to avoid Elkin's attack, he thought, "That's right." Suddenly, Elkin's raised sword froze, startling Eren. Mark and the others immediately became panicked. He shouted, "Is it a feint?" Then Mark shouted again as he noticed Elkin thrusting his sword directly at Eren, but it was actually to the left. Eren quickly managed to block that strike with his sword. Suddenly, Karda cried out, "No!" Karda spoke just as Elkin charged forward to attack him. "It's on the right." But Eren grabbed Elkin's right wrist. He held it tightly, preventing him from striking him. With a face dripping with sweat, Eren smiled and complimented, "You're really good." Elkin was no better, sweating profusely, excitedly replying, "You are too." After that compliment, he immediately lifted his leg. Eren suddenly felt a pain from his leg and realized, my leg. Elkin's leg had kicked his. He easily sent Eren flying into the air, forcing him to let go. Caught off guard by this move, Eren explained, "A sweep kick? He's really good." The sweeping kick was just to break the pincher hold for Elkin. Eren was still able to brace himself with his hands on the ground. Seizing the opportunity while his opponent was off balance, Elkin lunged forward and thrust his sword at Eren's hand. Eren was not that easy to catch, quickly dodging and delivering a kick to Elkin's leg. This made him stumble and cry out, "Oh." Then the two engaged in a fierce exchange of blows. They pressed closely against each other, looking into each other's eyes filled with competitiveness and determination. The battle between the two men was so intense that everyone around had to remain silent and watch. The man with the black beard looked at the fight and exclaimed, "The attacks and defenses are amazing." The bald man next to him added, "Are those two guys monsters or something?" Cradle took this opportunity to say, "Kui Karuta, do you think you can win against that human?" Carter was caught off guard and could only remain silent. At that moment, seeing Elkin's strength, Mark became fearful and thought, "I was going to provoke that guy. Thank goodness I didn't." Although the fight was tense, Eren was still in the mood to chat. "Should I teach you the weaknesses of dual-wielding users?" Elkin, fully intrigued, responded, "What is it?" Immediately, he raised his hand, which was holding something. In the blink of an eye, Eren threw what he was holding at Elkin, which was a handful of sand. With both hands holding swords and grappling with him, Elkin couldn't avoid the sand flying into his face. Cradle shouted, "Sand." Karn also excitedly chimed in, "Oh!" He took the chance to grab some sand when he fell. Because of the sand, Elkin struggled to stay away and could not stop clicking his tongue. He was forced to jump to avoid the attack. Eren did not give Elkin any time to rest, continuously attacking. With his vision temporarily obscured by the sand, it seemed that Elkin would be hit by Eren's strike. His hands dropped the sword. This was not a sign of surrender, but rather to allow Elkin to evade Eren's deadly blow. Seeing this, Mark immediately shouted, "Did he miss?" Just like that. Card also panicked. His hands are going limp from fatigue. "Oh no!" The two cried out as they saw Elkin return to normal, ready to fight. "That guy is coming back." He charged forward with his sword as everyone shouted, "To the right!" Eren calmly lowered his sword. In a moment of surprise, he pressed his sword against Elkin's neck, leaving him stunned. Everyone fell silent. Cradle and Karta also froze at this. Elkin, the one involved, could only gasp for breath with the sword against his neck. Eren breathed heavily from exhaustion and said, "Just as expected, a knight from Valvas. Your skills are incredible. If I didn't have this sword in hand, I might have lost." Then he pulled the sword out of Elkin's bleeding neck as the man opened his eyes wide in fear. Eren squinted and smiled, saying, "This sword has saved me countless times. It is the sword I cherish the most." Elkin seemed to accept something, bowing his head low. He let go of the sword, allowing it to fall to the ground. Elkin Isla knelt down, placing his hands on the ground in front of Eren. He solemnly made a vow, saying, "Eren Pendragon, you deserve the title of warrior more than I do, the Knight of Valvas." Elkin closed his eyes, showing submission, and said, "My name is Elkin Isla." To Eren's astonishment, his eyes wide open, he continued, "From now on, I swear I will become your sword and destroy your enemies." Those around them saw Eren's victory and erupted in cheers. However, a different wave surged within Eren. Did he say his name is Elkin Isla? Elkin Isla knelt on the ground, bowing his head, and said, "I am Elkin Isla, a knight of Valvas. From now on, I will become your sword and vow to defeat and crush anyone who opposes you." Hearing this, everyone continued to cheer and celebrate. Eren's face showed clear astonishment as he stuttered the name Elkin. Elkin Isla. Everyone looked at Eren, who was still mumbling, Isla. One person in the crowd, seeing this, raised a question. "Elkin Isla, is that the name of a famous knight?" When Mark was asked, he placed his hands on his hips and replied, "I don't know, this is the first time I've heard that name." Two other people nodded in agreement. Same here, V2. Looking at Eren's back, they speculated. Perhaps the master knows him. At this moment, Eren remembered and was instantly astonished. Elkin Isla, he is famously known as a trustworthy person, the strongest knight of Valvas. Eren's mind conjured up the powerful image of Elkin. In his previous life, a few years later, he would become known as the Sea Dragon King of the distant south. He was a member of the Duchy of Arangis and had participated in many battles to prove his worth, which led to his reputation spreading throughout the empire. Thinking of this, he suddenly smiled slightly. Although currently he was an unknown, he would become one of the heroes in the future. After thinking for a while, he knelt down on one knee, level with Elkin Isla. Seeing Eren kneeling just like himself in front of him, Elkin Isla was unexpectedly rendered speechless. The people around were equally astonished, staring in disbelief. Eren spoke up amidst his surprise. "Lift your head, Isla." He smirked and continued, "You are my sword, and I am your master. We are not so distant from each other. The only difference between us is our roles." Eren proceeded with his proposal. "I want you to be my partner." The scene shifted towards Karta and Eren's words, Mark Killian, and a few others just like them. Elkin Isla was so surprised that his eyes widened, and in his mind, he seemed to realize something. Then he bowed his head, smiling to show his acceptance of the proposal. Under the blue sky, Elkin's voice rose. "You are truly very interesting, Pendragon." The man with the long beard remarked with a smile. Perhaps he could rule the world. After all, it's Eren Pendragon. The bare-chested boy with sparkling eyes agreed, "I will follow this young man too." Mark Killian watched the two and remarked, "But no one said you would become his associates." A voice called out from somewhere, catching Eren's attention. "Is it over, Ray?" Both men looked up at the woman flying in the sky, surrounded by white griffins. The two guys were left speechless, shouting what? Elkin was also a bit surprised and murmured, "Griffin." Eren calmly called out, "Sol." The one called Sol gently landed on the ground, followed by the griffins. Around the spot where they landed, clouds of dust rose up before Eren and Elkin. Soldrake, with a very serious expression, looked straight ahead. The three people being stared at became somewhat petrified, standing rigid. They all wondered, what is this pressure? Who is this woman? "That's the white dragon," Soldrake, the bare-chested boy, shouted loudly. "Is that woman a dragon? What do you mean?" Mark couldn't explain either. "That's what I want to know." The man with the black beard stroked his beard and exclaimed, "You have a point, this beauty and unrealistic nobility." Mark Killian sighed. "Of course she's beautiful, but she is a being that exudes so much power that just getting close to her makes your entire body freeze." Sol patted the griffin's head, looking at Eren, who was standing while Elkin was gradually getting up. He cheerfully extended his hand towards Sol and introduced, "Let me introduce her to you, Isla. She is my contract maker, the white dragon of the Pendragon family, Soldrake." Elkin seemed a bit dazed upon hearing this. Then he took a step forward. Sol and Elkin stood facing each other. He asked, "White dragon, the ruler of Griffons, you are?" Soldrake remained silent, looking at the person in front of her. The bare-chested boy, stunned with a shaved head, said, "Hey, that kid Esla, he still stays calm in front of a dragon." The man with the black beard also looked a bit concerned. "He's that strong." Eren stood with his arms crossed on one side, watching this scene, and couldn't help but think, "No, you are wrong." He recalled the image of Sol in dragon form the first time he encountered. "When I first met Sol in a past life, I felt that same pressure." That is not something that can be ignored just because one is strong. Not everyone strong can overcome the oppression of a dragon. Then he looked at Elkin in front of him and stated, "You are different, Elkin Isla." He lowered his head and smiled. "You are indeed interesting to the very last moment." Eren then looked up at the sky, smiling with satisfaction. He told himself, "From now on, I will expand beyond the borders of my territory and seek out the famous individuals from my past life, such as..." In Eren's mind, an image appeared of a young man sitting amid piles of gold and jewels, the one who possessed so much wealth that it could rival the royal treasury, the young businessman of the free city, Aiden Dorian. He then remembered someone with a magic mirror and a house in Valvas who had built a tower in the southern part of Valvas and settled there. He was also someone who crafted many magical tools, a transcendent sorcerer, Gian of Bellin. Eren continued to recall a young knight wearing a feathered hat, wielding a sword, and leading an entire battalion standing on a mountain. A 20-year-old young man with only a few hundred soldiers who conquered all the northern knights, a genius general, Ivan Jeter. With these goals in mind, he silently told himself, "Having the memories of my past life is the most valuable asset I possess. With them, I can gradually recruit those who had ruled the world back then." Suddenly, a continuous beat from the orc's shirt caught everyone's attention. Cradle held a magical stone in his hand and exclaimed, "Ah, the Elder is calling." In his hand was a magical stone with many glowing green crystals on it. Mark Killian curiously asked, "What is that?" Cradle smiled with delight. He. "This is magic that uses minerals. It allows us to communicate with each other." Carta added, "With this, we can easily talk to the Elder using magic." Mark remarked, "Magic is truly convenient." Cradle said, "Let me see." With that, Cradle closed his eyes and the blue light from the stone radiated. Then he opened his eyes and began to convey the information he received. Some humans have entered the Ancona forest with weapons. They seem to be a dozen soldiers. This statement successfully captured the attention of Eren, Elkin, and Sol. Everyone there fell silent after hearing this. Someone wondered, what? Cradle continued, "The leader of them seems to be wearing an elf armor helmet." Eren, hearing this, was extremely panicked and roared, "Elf armor helmet?" Carta next to him asked, He even defeated both elves and took it as armor. Is that something a human can do? Mark Killian stroked his chin thoughtfully. If that's the case, he is a very strong and terrifying opponent. Elkin remained silent, with his eyes showing that he had something to say. Eren's hands trembled as he thought to himself, a person wearing an elf armor helmet. There can only be one such person in this world. Images from his past life suddenly flooded back. A bearded man wearing an elf helmet, Baltai, was laughing as he held Eren's bloody head. One swing was made, and the head was severed. Eren, sweating profusely, suddenly screamed, Baltai. Everyone was startled and turned to look. He looked extremely frightening when angry. The aura of murder and power radiated, surprising everyone. Eren quickly stepped forward and asked, Cradle, where is he? Cradle, being asked, was taken aback and stammered, the report was sent from. Later in the sunset, Eren decisively commanded, let's go to the orc village. The image of a dead orc lying in a pool of blood appeared. Baltai, holding his weapon, spoke up, finally, I've dealt with these little pests. Orcs are indeed formidable opponents. Then he bared his teeth in a grin, but Baltai smiled with satisfaction, pointing to his own elven hat. How can it compare? The elf made this armor hat, after all. A hand raised a letter titled Pendragon. The person continued speaking while the yellow-eyed wolf observed. They have acquired the power of the white dragon and are recruiting more soldiers, slowly building a strong military force. Lowering the paper, the smirk of Baltai's face was revealed. Even more irritating was that after doing what they wanted with this land, they were also reinforcing their troops. You see that too, right? Currently, he was leaning against the yellow-eyed wolf, surrounded by Baltai's soldiers. He was asking questions to a centaur. The centaur was silent for a moment before replying, that. Without letting the centaur speak further, Baltai raised a mirror emitting purple energy. From within the mirror, more purple energy began to oscillate. Then, a figure in a black hood slowly emerged. He spoke as Baltai smiled with joy. The proud shield of the Empire, the spear, the crossbow, and the arrows. The appearance of a person from the mirror startled the centaurs. The figure in the black hood gradually lifted his head, revealing glowing eyes as he performed the hypnosis spell. If you acquire these items, then from now on, his final words successfully hypnotized the centaurs. You will become the strongest army in the world. The scene shifted to the orc village. At this moment, the Pendragon clan's troops had arrived. The orc children quickly ran out to welcome them with cheerful faces and giggles. Some climbed on a Crudel, tugging at his hair, making him say, you silly kids, stop it. You're going to pull my hair out. Ignoring those words, they continued to call, Daddy, Daddy. The entire Pendragon army was now warmly welcomed by the orc children. Looking at the child perched on his shoulder, laughing and talking, Mark exclaimed, it's hard to imagine that the children of those crazy orcs would be like this. Carta and a little orc boy chimed in, just like tiger cubs and lion cubs are similar to kittens. Hearing that, he nodded in agreement. Well, that makes sense. Then Mark looked in another direction with a worried expression. But another orc child, extremely excited, laughed and rushed towards a person's legs. But that child suddenly froze. Eren was standing with his arms crossed, exuding a terrifying aura in front of the child. His green eyes lit up, his brows furrowed, clearly showing his discomfort. Seeing him looking so fearsome, the child quickly screamed and ran away. Both Mark and Carta saw this scene and were quite uneasy, discussing among themselves, he has been like this for quite a while. Yeah, ever since we heard the news from the elders, he has always had that scary look. Thoughts crossed Mark's mind as he looked at his master and more so about how he imagined things during that moment behind his master. He recalled when he first heard the news that Eren had gotten angry and unleashed his power, emanating something that resembled the aura of a dragon. As if he couldn't hold it in any longer, Carta spoke up. Hey, Pendragon, don't make the kids cry like that. At the same time, another child shouted. The two turned to see Elkin standing there, his hand reaching out, but the child ran away. He didn't say a word, looking quite harmless. However, the gloomy atmosphere around Elkin startled the child with his outstretched hand. Therefore, it ran away, and Elkin froze at that action. He was disappointed, unable to say anything. While Elkin remained in that frozen position, the two Marks and Carta shared the same thought. Could it be that he likes cute things? Just then, an elderly voice spoke up. Thank you for coming, the new leader of Pendragon. The elder appeared majestically with the staff in hand. Carta immediately exclaimed, Elder. Mark looked more surprised. Oh, that person is... And Krubel smirked. Kuki head. That's my father. Everyone. The elder suddenly noticed a special person among the crowd. At the same time, Soldrake looked up and made eye contact with him. Quickly, he shouted loudly, Everyone. All the orcs in the house heard the sound and rushed out, startled to see Sol. Subsequently, all the orcs in the forest knelt down and worshipped Soldrake, respectfully greeting the deity of the forest. They continued with their greetings while Saul remained indifferent and Eren felt discomfort. To avoid wasting time, Saul proactively suggested, if this keeps happening, we won't get to the main issue. I will rest up above. He quickly agreed, okay. Before flying away, Saul didn't forget to remind, Ray, I understand why you are angry. I feel the same, but if you get stuck in your anger, you will lose yourself. Hearing this, Eren's mood worsened. He was extremely uncomfortable. After speaking, Saul spread his wings and flew up into the large treetops, which left Krudel astonished. Ooh. Once finished, Eren looked at the elder, nodded in agreement. Then he bowed his head, raised his hand to his chest, and introduced himself. I am Eren Pendragon, Elder. The elder seemed to recognize him and said with a smile, You are the son of Duke Gordon. Please come in. As they entered the house, the four of them sat down to talk with each other. The elder raised the cup of water and began to tell the story. Indeed, dozens of people armed with weapons entered this forest. He frowned in seriousness as he continued the tale, and at the same time, they managed to evade my surveillance magic. I only realized it when they were leaving the forest. Hearing this, Krudel spoke up with a question. They evaded your magic? Were there any mages among them? The elder explained to his son, No, just soldiers and giant wolves, but I am certain there was magic involved. Upon hearing this, the boy looked up, rubbed his chin, and said, That's quite a hassle. Eren, on the other hand, remained silent. The elder continued the story. Furthermore, I set the Orc warriors, but they were all killed. This shocked Karta so much that he exclaimed, What? Eren was also thinking, Giant wolves, combat power that can defeat both orcs and elves. Just as I thought, it must be Baltai. He has come to this forest and brought along the Rakshasa Legion. Without hesitation, he raised the issue. Earlier they came to meet the Centaur tribe. At this point, Eren turned to Karta and asked, Centaur tribe? Karta, confused, responded, What? Why those stupid horses? Eren heard this and put his hand on his chin, pondering the complicated relationship between the Pendragon clan, the orcs, and the Centaur tribe. He recalled the reason why the Centaurs and orcs were not at peace. It seemed that the Centaurs originally lived in the Ancona forest, and the Pendragon family moved to the nearby area, allowing the orcs to inhabit that forest. In Eren's mind, a map of the 3 locations appeared. He thought, surely the Centaurs, those creatures that hate humans, attacked the Pendragons, but the orcs became the clan's shield. Then the image of 2 Centaurs and orcs frowning and glaring at each other emerged. That was why the Centaurs and orcs did not get along. Things were even tenser because both were warlike tribes that liked to pick fights. Thinking of this, Eren rested his chin on his hand and sighed. Well, I don't need to get involved in this matter because I'm just an outsider. I've let it go and hope nothing will happen afterward. But just as he thought this, Mark suddenly burst in shouting, There's trouble, Master. He panted as he announced, The Centaurs. Outside the house, the Centaurs were violently attacking the orc tribe. Eren hurriedly ran outside, confused. What does this mean? Why are they suddenly? Mark also ran after him, saying it has been a long time since there was an armed conflict with the Centaurs, but suddenly an arrow was drawn aimed straight at Eren. Fortunately, he quickly caught it. Holding the arrow in his hand, he noticed something. A red emblem with a golden lion and a crown appeared. Mark exclaimed in panic, Is that the Empire's emblem? Why do the Centaurs have it? Eren seemed to have reached the peak of his anger. He thought, I know why. Looking at the Centaurs fiercely fighting, Eren thought to himself, They have allied with each other. His eyes became filled with rage and bloodlust surged once again, spiraling out of control. Seeing this, Mark hesitantly called out, Master. He coldly commanded, Massacre them. They attacked us first. In a state of fury, Eren shouted, Don't let anyone survive. Even if you erase them from this world, I don't care. At the same time, from above, Soldrake was watching the battle between the orc tribe and the Centaurs unfold. Saul remained silent, his mind occupied with other thoughts. Eren's anger was evident as he gritted his teeth, thinking to himself, the Centaur tribe, the enemy of the orcs. Now, countless armed Centaurs are charging straight toward the orc tribe's territory, slaughtering indiscriminately. Just as Eren thought, they have teamed up with Baltai. Eren's fury at that moment unconsciously radiated a powerful aura around him. His rage took the form of a dragon made of blue fire, causing Killian nearby to feel fear. His thoughts were filled with astonishment. His lordship is exuding the same aura as back then. With a fierce expression on his face, Eren commanded, Destroy them all, spare no one. Eradicate them from the world. Saying this, he dashed swiftly toward the chaotic battlefield between the orcs and the Centaurs. Reed and Barrio turned around, surprised by Eren's presence. Both exclaimed in unison, My lord. Elkin was also stunned by Eren's sudden appearance, calling out in shock, Pendragon. The Centaur is drawing his bow to shoot at Eren. He notices the arrow is flying towards him. He swings a sword engulfed in blue flames, slicing through and incinerating the arrows headed his way. Reed doesn't understand what just happened, asking uncertainly, "What?" Barrio is astonished by Eren's ability, saying, "Did he just split their arrows in half?" At this moment, Eren has rushed toward one of the centaurs, preparing to swing his sword. Elkin unexpectedly concedes so fast. The slash goes straight through the centaur's arm, severing it. Reed and Barrio exclaim, "Wow, he did it." The centaur that was just struck down is charging back at Eren, preparing to draw his sword. The centaur draws his sword and swings, but Eren is able to block it. He is startled, his eyes wide with surprise, thinking, "Are they afraid at all?" The centaur's eyes are filled with madness, his teeth clenched and saliva dripping continuously. He shouts loudly, "You bastards! You have taken our forest and now we will finally completely annihilate you." He shouts even louder, "We have expanded our army, just waiting for this moment." Eren was stunned by this information, exclaiming, "What, really?" The other centaurs, hearing their companions shout, felt empowered and rushed in like a storm, yelling, "Protect our forest! Protect our forest!" Karda swung his mace and hit a centaur in front of him. The centaur retaliated, but he dodged and complained. They're all acting exactly the same. He also wondered, have centaurs always been this strong? Cradle, though out of breath, replied, "It's magic." They had been mesmerized. Crabble continued, "Their fear and anger have been exploited. One centaur was attacking wildly." Cradle kept explaining, "Their minds are controlled by magic. They are forced to push beyond their physical limits and are turned into killing machines devoid of reason." A centaur was swinging his sword at Barrio, but he managed to block it. Letting out a quick eek, Killian swooped in from behind the centaur, raised his sword high, and shouted, "Take this." The centaur spotted him and kicked him with both hind legs. He was hit midair feeling pain. He spat blood and yelled, He collapsed to the ground. Baryon and Reed rushed over worried, exclaiming, "Commander." He lay on the ground, his whole body trembling, startled by the power. He thought, "It pierced through my armor, even the ribs. It's so strong." The centaurs were now gaining the upper hand, killing and trampling both humans and orcs that opposed them. Elkin was fighting desperately against a centaur. Eren swung powerfully at the centaur in front of him, causing it to groan, From behind, another centaur shot an arrow at him. He agilely dodged it, clicked his tongue in disdain, and said, "How brazen." He turned to the tree, calling Sol. He requested, "Help us deal with these wretched horsemen too." Sol calmly replied, "Both the orcs and the centaurs are like my children. I cannot take part in this battle." Eren unexpectedly asked back, "Whoa, what?" He looked back at the battlefield, thinking, "Damn it." Terrible memories of being Raven facing Baltai came flooding back. He was furious, grinding his teeth, his eyes burning, thinking, "Those bastards." A cry of eek pulled him out of his thoughts. A centaur is chasing an orc child. The child cries and can only run forward. The tip of the centaur's spear is about to pierce the child's body. Eren quickly rushes in to hug the child and avoids the spear's tip. He bends down to check if the child is hurt. The child looks at him, stammering, eyes full of tears. Thank you, sir." He is taken aback. Looking around, he sees the brutal scene of this massacre. Bodies, orcs pile on top of each other, while the centaurs continue their slaughter. He thinks, our forces are diminishing, and the orc village has been destroyed. He is shocked and weighs the responsibility on his shoulders, asking himself, what will Pendragon do now? Without hesitating for a second, he jumps straight onto the saddle of a horse. He shouts, "Hey," to attract the attention of the centaurs. He provokes them. "You half-human, half-horse bastards." He pulls on the reins. The horse rears up, striking its hooves majestically in front of the centaurs. He continues to taunt them, his gaze filled with defiance. "I heard that centaurs are proud warriors, but depend on human weapons, a species you despised and shamelessly target children. I guess you are just a tribe of half-human, half-horse scum." He pulled the reins, steering the horse towards a dead centaur lying on the ground, continuing to provoke. "To deal with a lowly tribe like yours, one of me is more than enough. You've come this far and still can't even behead the enemy's leader." He said, "Your dead warriors are crying despairingly in hell." Saying this, he let the horse step on the head of the dead centaur beneath its feet. This action startled all the centaurs, infuriating them to the extreme. They charged towards Eren, while he urged the horse to run away. He led them out of the village under the gaze of everyone. Cravel spoke up. "Is he doing all this to force the centaur tribe out of the village?" Karda worriedly said, "He can't fight so many centaurs at once." Elkin was astonished by what Eren had just done. Soldrake stood high above, witnessing everything. She waved her hand. Immediately, a griffin swooped down from the sky, screeching, "Ja!" to the astonishment of those below. It landed before Elkin, spreading its wide wings, its large green eyes staring at him. He asked, "A Gryphon." He turned to Soldrake and asked, "Is it you?" Soldrake did not answer, only gazed into the distance. The Griffin cried out, "Jaji," as if telling him to get on so it can't take him away. His eyes dimmed, understanding its meaning. Eren spurred his horse, leading the Centaur tribe away from the orc village. The Centaurs knew it was a trap set by Eren, yet they followed closely. After a while, they suddenly stopped. Eren pulled the reins, turned back, and saw the Centaur leader grinning at him. At this moment, his situation was extremely dangerous. In front of him was a bottomless abyss, and behind him was the encirclement of the Centaur tribe. He had no way to retreat. The Centaur leader laughed coldly. "So you accept being bait to save your army? Truly a merciful lord, aren't you? However, if you die here, the orc village will be destroyed as well. What a foolish decision." Eren refused to back down and provoked. "You Matthew and half-horse bastards are the real fools. Didn't I tell you? I alone am more than enough to deal with you." On the outside, he speaks confidently, but internally, he is secretly worried. The Centaur tribe is being affected by the enhancement magic. Can I really handle this? Facing such a large group, he truly isn't sure. "We are ready to tear them apart." The leader of the Centaur tribe tightened his grip on his weapon and barked the command. He volunteered to charge at Eren. "We are going to rip that insolent mouth off your face." Eren raised his sword, his expression tense, ready to face the battle. Suddenly, at that moment, several arrows flew through the air from behind him. Those arrows accurately struck the left chest of the Centaur soldiers. Eren was startled and quickly turned his head. He saw a white griffin soaring through the sky with someone sitting on its back, but the distance was too great to see the figure clearly. As the griffin flew closer under the cold light of the moon, the person's face gradually became distinct. It was Isla. Eren was both surprised and happy. Isla. Isla knocked an arrow and said, "Pendragon, I told you that I would become your sword." He aimed his bow at the Centaur tribe and prepared to defeat your enemies. The Centaur tribe was also looking up at the sky. In contrast to Eren, the appearance of the Gryphon surprised them even more. A Gryphon. That's the Gryphon of the guardian deity. Suddenly, the Gryphon opened its mouth and let out a long cry. Asla rode it, flying down close to the Centaur tribe. The Centaur soldiers hurriedly shot arrows at him. Asla leaned low, easily dodging the incoming arrows. Then Asla quickly raised his bow and shot back. The arrow was swift and deadly, striking the left chest of one soldier. Soon after, several more soldiers were hit as well. Eren silently watched the scene before him. The Centaur clan members kept shooting arrows into the sky, but Isla riding the Griffin easily dodged them. He muttered, "Gryphon Knight." Griffins are mythical creatures that serve under the dragons. Although they have large bodies, to those looking up from below, they seem to dance in the sky. With the power they possess, they are used for hunting and military purposes, and they are extremely difficult to deal with. Thus, borrowing knowledge from ancient times, while Eren was still lost in thought, Isla rode the Gryphon close to a Centaur soldier. After a long period of rigorous training, the Gryphon suddenly raised its claws. It struck the soldier's head with a powerful blow. The first Rhydeeple Griffon had appeared. Another soldier aggressively charged at Isla. After hundreds of battles with the selected knights, Isla quickly drew a blade and swung it, knocking the soldier away. Eren watched the Centaur soldier fall. A Gryphon knight, he silently whispered the name Elkin Isla, suddenly remembering his nickname from his previous life, the Stormbearer. At this moment, Isla of the Gryphon had attacked other soldiers. He had been beaten for so long, yet his expression remained unchanged. Eren suddenly understood and smiled. So that's it, indeed an aim that says it all. The soldiers of the Centaur tribe fell continuously. The leader, furious, said, "We are being." He halted mid-sentence and quickly corrected himself. The whole army retreat, he hastily ordered. Then he decisively turned around and fled. Isluk immediately realized their intentions. They were running towards the center of the forest. He calculated silently. If they go deeper into the woods, the Gryphons won't be able to chase them, and they will be able to recover and regroup. An arrow shot swiftly towards the Centaur leader's leg. He screamed in pain and collapsed onto the ground. Eren watched him from behind. The arrow had been shot by him. Sitting on horseback, the bow in his hand was still aimed directly at the Centaur leader. He smiled. The Empire's crossbow is indeed of high quality. It must be worth much more than those half-men, half-horses coming out of some forest. His smile gradually turned cold. Is that right, Centaur army leader? The leader couldn't stand up. He kept moaning, helplessly watching Eren approach him. He reeved in his horse, stopping in front of the leader. His voice was gentle. "Even if the pain disappears, you still can't move with a broken leg." The leader growled. A red Imperial shield hung on the saddle. Eren grabbed it and raised the shield towards the Centaur leader. The shield suddenly emitted a golden glow. The light flew over and gradually surrounded the leader. Then he realized the beam of light seemed to be penetrating his body. The wound on his hand began to close. He was astonished. My wound. Its eyes gradually returned to normal, no longer shrouded in dark light. The Centaur leader stared wide-eyed at Eren. Why are you helping me? He couldn't explain this situation. Eren spoke flatly, I'm just returning you to normal. Otherwise, I would have ended your life already. His gaze suddenly sharpened. Now tell me, where is the one who provided you with these weapons, Baltai? He asked the leader with a low voice. The weapons you mentioned are the bows and arrows with the symbol of the Empire, but they emit a strange purple light. The leader sitting on the ground looked up and replied, Baltai of the Demon Legion, he still hasn't resolved his doubts. How do you know that name? Eren coldly replied, I am the one asking the questions. With that, he aimed his crossbow at him. What happened between him and the Centaur tribe? The leader looked straight at him. He said he suddenly invaded the forest. As he spoke, he lowered his head and suggested an alliance with us. The scene fell into a stream of memories. Baltai said that the Pendragon clan had restored the power of the White Dragon. He provided a piece of paper to prove his words and is currently recruiting soldiers while strengthening their weapons. He clearly stated that they are planning to turn the tables against their archenemy, the Centaur tribe. On his scruffy, bearded face, a malevolent expression was evident. So, before that happens, I will lend you weapons. The leader continued to recount Baltai's words, Go, destroy the orc village. Eren listened silently as he spoke, Take back the Ancona forest with the strength of the Centaur clan. At this point, he cut in. So, based on those baseless accusations, he glanced at him indifferently. You were tempted by that proposal. The leader still bowed his head, gritting his teeth as he voiced his suspicion. It could be due to his magic. He recalled when Baltai had a mirror and said, It comes from his mirror. The leader recounted, In the mirror, there was a cloaked figure speaking to us. The person in the mirror had a very strange face. He continued, At the same time, everyone lost their composure and was overwhelmed by rage and resentment. He slumped down. I can't remember what happened after that moment. Eren tilted his head down toward him without saying a word. He turned the horse and walked toward Elkin, who was sitting on the griffin. He asked, somewhat surprised, to Pendragon. Eren held the shield, lowering his eyes to the soldiers of the Centaur clan. Then he used the power of the shield to help them heal their wounds quickly. They looked astonished as the wounds on their bodies gradually disappear, wondering, my wound. The leader of the Centaur tribe was also very surprised by Eren's actions. He leaned over and looked at them, saying, It seems that his voice was broken due to excessive exhaustion. My life force can only heal this much. Elkin was confused. Why did you do that, Pendragon? He blinked and exhaled. Our enemy is the one who incited them, and moreover, his gaze was solemn. The one who created those negative emotions with beads of sweat still rolling down his face was none other than the Pendragon family. Therefore, we also bear responsibility in this matter. The leader's eyes lit up when he heard Eren speak. He put his shield away and told them, I cannot resurrect the fallen centaurs. The centaurs he had just saved did not know how to respond. The leader said, They are warriors of the Centaur army. He clenched his fist and continued, Dying on the battlefield is not something they regret. Eren did not know what to say to the leader. At this moment, the leader compared, Young Pendragon, you are very different from your ancestors. His expression remained indifferent. Is that so? Time will answer everything. The leader asked, Do you remember what you once said? He gazed intently at him. You are truly a wise and gifted ruler. The leader decided, Therefore, from now on, the Centaur army, as he spoke, he bowed in respect, will become allies of the Pendragon clan. Both Eren and Elkin were astonished, their eyes wide at this decision. He explained his reason for wanting to become allies, to take revenge on those who have turned us into this. He stated seriously, I swear that we will not hesitate to give our all to cooperate with the Pendragon clan. Having said that, he turned to look at the two clan members and asked, Am I right, everyone? The two clan members looked at each other, unsure of what to say. Then the two also made their decision. One agreed. That's right. The other said, If the elder wishes it, we will follow. Eren bowed his head, silently contemplating this matter. After thinking it over, he raised his head and said, Then we will rely on the Centaur army. He smiled slightly, and the task of protecting the forest under the banner of the mightiest knights. Eren and the leader of the Centaur clan shook hands to signify cooperation. He said, From now on, we are teammates. After the dispute with the Centaur tribe ended, a peaceful atmosphere once again enveloped the Ancona forest. The soldiers were healed by the water spirit and then feasted heartily at the celebration of peace. During the feast, everyone enjoyed eating and chatting joyfully, except for Elkin, who sat alone in a corner, not interacting with anyone. He sat bored with his chin in his hand, gazing at the scenery outside the forest. Suddenly, a voice calling Huo caught his attention. In front of him were two boys from the Centaur tribe. One boy holding a drumstick praised, "You're really cool." The admiration was evident in the boy's eyes. "You can ride a griffin too." After saying that, the two boys quickly climbed onto him, each exclaiming, "He-ka!" while he still didn't understand what was happening. As if realizing something, he opened his eyes wide. Then he gently patted the head of the boy who was climbing on him. In a private room, Eren was talking to a member of the Centaur tribe. Criddle said, "Magic comes from a mirror," he said, looking at the cup in his hand, pondering deeply. Eren clasped his hands together and asked, "Is that possible?" He replied, "I don't have enough knowledge to answer this question." The person sitting next to the leader said, "However, it is a very powerful and complex type of magic." He continued, "Mind control and enhancement," he analyzed, "and not just to the extent of affecting the targeted individual." He leaned in and added, "Something like controlling the emotions of many Sagittari at once." After the analysis, he concluded, "The one who created this is a fearsome wizard." This statement made Eren ponder. At night, the Ancona forest was very quiet. The scenery within was incredibly peaceful. Eren stood on a branch, leaning against the trunk, gazing into the distance. Suddenly, someone called out to him, "Why do you look so pensive, Ray?" He turned around and replied, "Sol." He crossed his arms and looked at her, asking, "Is it you, the one who let Isla ride the Griffin?" She looked straight at him and huffed. "It's just that they sensed the aura of a night mage on him." Eren turned away and said, "Perhaps he has ridden a Griffin before." His gaze was deep, but for some reason, he did not want to talk about it. Sol said, "Humans," she looked at him and continued, "are very complex creatures." She suddenly changed the subject, "Aren't you?" She carried an inquisitive gaze that raging dragon power devours. Eren coldly replied, "Raging dragon power." He remembered standing still in that raging dragon power. He explained that power surged out suddenly. Sol stood opposite him. "It belongs to my contract. Your body has the ability to wield dragon power, and the control will vary depending on the user." Eren fell silent, glancing blankly. "If I let my anger overwhelm my rationality, I won't be able to gain an objective view," he thought. "That's right." Its face became serious, "but there is still something I can't understand." He remembered his past life, how at first he had forgotten it out of anger. He recalled himself at that time, but in his past life, he must have become a member of the Demon Army now, and the Demon Legion was fighting in the distant southern lands in the Wooden Sea. He thought further, facing the Troll King, the most brutal creature. Half of the Demon Legion had been annihilated. The fierce image of the Troll King emerged in his mind from that horrific battle. He remembered Baltai, but Baltai was also there, so he speculated. Baltai has really contacted the Centaur tribe. He felt very strange. Countless questions arose. What about the battle at Mokhai and the King of the Trolls? Where is my past self, Ravenwolf? Sol looked at him pensively. He was still thinking as he recalled something he had said back then. He remembered. He said everything is connected. The decline of the Pendragon family, the Vel family being destroyed, and now the destroyers are trying to eliminate the Pendragons. He looked down and said to Sol, "Let's try to go to my homeland." Then Eren quickly lifted his head and said, "The place where a family has lost its honor." His gaze was cold, the land of shame. Eren quietly said to White Dragon, "It's time for us to return to my homeland." Eren crossed his arms over his chest, leaning against the tree, his eyes staring into the distance full of thought, the place where my family once lost its dignity, the land full of humiliation, heading towards Sisek. The scene shifts to a desolate, ruined city. Hidden beneath the rubble is a tattered flag featuring an eagle soaring freely. Behind it are two crossed swords, the emblem of a once mighty clan that has fallen. Next, a blonde young man is enjoying a lavish meal. He savors each dish slowly. Next to him sits a blonde girl, while in front of them, many nobles are kneeling in unison. The noble father and son are taken aback by the sudden appearance of these two. Why? Why have they suddenly come to the Serid territory? The son and daughter of the Emperor, Prince Ian. This blonde young man is the second prince of the Ayan Aragon Empire. The girl with two braids, Princess Ingrid, is the princess of the Ingrid Aragon Empire. All members of the Serid clan are kneeling before these powerful figures of the Empire. Emperor, Your Highness, and Princess, Your Highness. They continue to enjoy the luxurious meal amid the reverence of the Serid clan. Ian, with a smug expression, gazes down at the Serid family. He smirks and kicks the dining table in front of him. The Serid father and son were startled by the prince's brazen actions. Ian's face was downcast with a domineering expression as he said, "Bunch of trash." The Serid family, frightened, hurriedly pleaded for forgiveness. "We are very sorry, Your Highness." Princess Ingrid sighed, intervening, "Come on, royal brother, you're making me lose my mood. You don't need to consume everything." Ian smugly replied, "I was just waiting for you to finish, royal sister. I'm not a good brother. It doesn't make you happy at all." The Serid family below dared not utter a word in the face of the prince's brutality. they were still in a state of fear and loss. Ian continued addressing the Serad family. There is only one reason that I, the Crown Prince, have come to this remote countryside. Your neighbor is the territory of Duke Pendragon, along with its master, Eren Pendragon. Upon hearing this name, the father and son were truly surprised. Ian continued to arrogantly say, the Eren I know is no different from a frail, weak earthworm. It's hard to believe that when he woke up from his coma, he was able to forge a pact with the White Dragon. Do you know what happened to him? Before the prince's question, the father hesitated for a moment. Then, he quickly turned to his daughter and asked, You've met him, haven't you, Luna? What is he like? Hearing her father's question, Luna hesitated. Her face suddenly flushed pink as she thought about Eren. She said, I knew him before, but it's as if he has become a completely different person. The more Eren was mentioned, the more her cheeks flushed with shyness. He has become bolder, yet still calm and even stronger. It was unclear when, but Ian was standing right in front of Luna, his eyes burning red, emanating a terrifying aura. He threateningly spoke to Luna. Is he better than me? His red eyes and curled lips resembled a wild beast directing its gaze at the small girl in front of him. She was utterly terrified, her body trembling, unable to utter a word. Ian gathered his strength and a golden aura gradually emerged. He began to laugh cunningly. Hey. The moan in his laughter echoed throughout the Serad palace was also when the powerful aura of the lion within him erupted, shaking the entire space. The Serad family members witnessing the scene were all terrified, shrinking in fear. Only the head of the Serad family managed to keep a bit of composure and carefully observe, what is it? An aura? The aura of an invader? Ian suddenly exploded in anger, shouting loudly, That white worm is seducing girls, huh? He turned to look at his princess, saying sarcastically, I'm so amazed, Ingrid. Princess Ingrid remained unfazed, ignoring her brother's troublemaking. He continued to address Luna, who was kneeling in front of him, saying, Hey, Miss Serad, come with me. Luna was very surprised by Ian's offer. She stared blankly at him, bewildered. Ian grabbed her chin, threateningly stating, This is an order. That white worm has crossed the line, hasn't it, miss? Luna didn't dare resist, trembling as she looked at the tyrannical prince in front of her. I can't refuse, he is the second prince, the tyrant and dragon. The scene shifted to the castle where Eren was living. Eren was confused when he heard the report. The prince and princess are coming here. The butler reported the situation to Eren. Yes, the second prince, Ian, and his sister Ingrid. Eren crossed his arms and placed them on the table, saying, What the hell are those bastards thinking? The butler felt awkward hearing Eren say that. Bastards, this. Eren remained unfazed and asked, What? The butler hesitated to speak. Princess Ingrid is your former fiancé, and it was Ian who broke off the engagement. Ian was startled and panicked upon hearing he had another fiancé. What the hell? I have another fiancé before Miss Serad. Did you know? Eren imagined Eren's tear-streaked face. It turned out the other person was a princess. He recalled having heard about her before. Eren frowned and sighed at his awkward situation. It had become quite complicated. 1 month after the Centaur incident, many new knights had joined us. Aslad started organizing a knight unit in Gryphons, significantly strengthening our military force. Furthermore, I have been able to control the aura of the White Dragon to a considerable degree. The Pendragon family usually rests every summer, so I can use this as an excuse to drop by the mansion near Sisek. The decline of the Vault family and the search for those pulling the strings behind it, and the thing right in front of me. After a moment of thought, arranging a series of events, Eren asked the butler, So the reason they are trying to meet me has something to do with the engagement, right? I don't know, but please be careful. The second prince has been named the next emperor and throughout the empire. He is known as a tyrant. So if you somehow affect his mood. Eren quickly interrupted, Wait, why has the second prince been named the next emperor? It is because the condition of the first prince seems to have worsened. Eren, filled with thoughts, leaned back and pondered. As he was lost in thought, he suddenly recalled something. Wait, Ian? It shouldn't be Ian. He remembered in his previous life when he was Raven, reading news about the next emperor. In his past life, the name of the person who would become the next emperor was Goofly. He unexpectedly mentioned the name Goofly, which puzzled the butler. He asked the butler, Is the name of the Grand Prince Goofly? No, sir, his name is Scion Aragon. I have never heard the name Goofly before. Eren was suddenly lost in thought. That was neither the name of the Grand Prince nor the second prince. What kind of mysterious name is Goofly? He compared each event that happened in his previous life with this one. It seemed that everything was not the same. The current future was different from what happened in his previous life. Could they be linked? He raised his index finger, channeling the magical power within his body. The White Dragon magic power in him surged vigorously. Just one finger was enough for him to unleash tremendous force. Now I have a reason to meet that prince, Ian Aragon. The entourage of the prince and princess moved into the territory of the Pendragon family. The people of the territory respectfully knelt to welcome the prince and princess of the empire. Accompanying the prince and princess's carriage were many knights for protection. They shouted loudly to announce, "The royal family has arrived, show your loyalty." Ian strode forward with the fierce spirit of an invading lion entering the castle. Wherever he went, a commanding aura pressed down on those around him. The Pendragon family could not help but kneel, trembling. What is this oppression? He is of royal blood. We cannot lift our heads. The tyrant Eren Pendragon. Ian's gaze quickly identified his target. Eren Pendragon approached Ian smoothly, showing no difficulty in the presence of his terrifying aura. Witnessing this, Ian was somewhat surprised and sneered. Ha! Ian intensified his pressure further, attempting to intimidate Eren. Eren remained unfazed, his expression unchanged, approaching the Prince Ian without issue. Irritated, Ian said to Eren, "Don't you think you're holding your head too high, you Pendragon brat?" Eren replied nonchalantly, "Why should I? You're not even an emperor." Ian raised an eyebrow challengingly and responded, "But I will become an emperor." Eren paused at these words. Instantly, he summoned the power within him and said, "No, the one who will become emperor is not you." Ian was extremely surprised by Eren's words, causing a disturbance in the aura of power. Eren emitted a strong white dragon aura, countering Ian's invasive presence. He said, "How humiliating, isn't it? Second Prince Eren Pendragon?" The second Prince Ian was astonished by Eren's formidable aura. "The blood of the first emperor flows in my veins, along with the aura of the invader as well." However, Ian's pupils constricted, and he frowned in disbelief. "Am I being pushed back by that white worm?" Ian released the aura of the invader, but couldn't suppress Eren. Instead, he was being pushed back by Eren's white dragon aura. Is that the white dragon aura? Behind Eren, the figure with the absolutely dominating aura of the white dragon appeared, helping him to overpower the invader's aura. The second Prince Ian was furious at being outmatched and bitterly shouted, "Bastard, how dare you!" Just as Ian was preparing to charge at Eren for a fight, Princess Ingrid approached, grabbing the attention of both. Princess Ingrid walked towards the two, hands on her hips. Accompanying her was Miss Sarah Luna, who was getting out of the carriage behind them. Prince Ian wiped the sweat from his forehead and called out to the princess, "Ingrid!" Ingrid, staring intently at Ian, said, "Don't cause trouble, royal brother." Eren looked toward the girl who had just called Ian royal brother and speculated, "She calls him royal brother, so she must be a princess. But why is Luna Sarah here?" Eren turned his gaze toward Luna. She remained silent, her face shyly flushed and quite adorable. Princess Ingrid formally greeted Eren. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Duke. My name is Ingrid." Eren politely responded, "A pleasure to meet you. I am Eren Pendragon." Ingrid stepped closer to Eren and said, "We have been betrothed since before we were born, so we have never met." "Ah, I see." He, however, just as Luna Sarah said, "You are a strong and handsome man, Eren Pendragon." Ingrid gazed at Eren with infatuation, her cheeks flushed. Eren was stunned by what Ingrid had said, not understanding what this princess wanted. Ian frantically ran up to stop the two people. "Hey, Ingrid, have you ever?" Ingrid paid no attention to her brother and simply took Eren's hand, smiling as she said, "Will you take me for a walk around the castle?" Luva stood by, witnessing the scene, feeling very confused, but kept her thoughts to herself. So in the end, Princess Ingrid happily walked with Eren, while Ian seethed with anger, following closely behind to keep an eye on his sister, and Luna awkwardly trailed behind them. Eren walked with Ingrid, but his emotions were extremely complex at that moment. Things had become very complicated. Eren. Suddenly someone called Eren's name. It turned out to be Eren's family coming to greet him. Eren's mother, Halim, spoke up. "It's been a long time, Prince Ian, Princess Ingrid." Eren also cheerfully greeted them. "It's a pleasure to meet you." Ian was surprised looking at the beautiful girl in front of him and suddenly had an idea. Halim came up to Princess Ingrid to talk. "Do you remember me from when I was at the White Palace?" "Of course," Ingrid replied. Meanwhile, the second Prince Ian approached Eren and turned on his charm. "Miss Pendragon, could you please tell me your name?" Eren answered happily. "My name is Eren." "Eren, what a beautiful name, just like a flower." "My name is Eren Pendragon, the second prince of the Empire. I am the top warrior of the Imperial City, blessed by the gods." Eren did not pay attention to the flirtatious words of the second Prince Ian. Her attention was focused on her older brother, and she joyfully called out, "Brother!" Eren's eyes sparkled as she looked at Eren and said, "Today you shine even brighter. I can feel your aura." Ian, seeing this, was visibly annoyed. "I'm a prince, yet I'm being ignored." He was so angry that he was seething, his presence exuding an aura that intended to intimidate others. The little girl Maya saw Ian like this and was very frightened. Clutching her stuff, grabbed it tightly. Then she startled and shouted, running towards someone. She hugged Elkin's leg, tears in her eyes, looking up at Ian with fear and sadness. It turned out to be Elkin, a tall man with his arms crossed over his chest, coldly staring at Ian. Ian, irritated, addressed Elkin. Hey, you bastard, who are you? Elkin replied arrogantly, I am not obliged to report my name to you. Hearing Elkin's words, Ian was very surprised by that audacious reply. Immediately, he shouted in anger, This bastard, how dare a human knight like you disrespect me? Introduce yourself. Eren panicked, fearing a conflict would arise, and hurriedly intervened. Your Highness, he is a knight of Valvast, so please spare him. A knight of Valvast, is it? I see. Those infamous freaks. Ian, with a belligerent expression, looked at Elkin and said, Hey, let's have a match. I will make you understand who the real strong one is. You won't be able to do that. Hearing Elkin's brazen words, Ian became extremely furious again, fuming with rage. Princess Ingrid, looking disgusted, coldly said to her brother, This is the second time, royal brother. If you cause any more trouble, you won't be allowed to speak for a whole year. Upon hearing his sister's words, Ian immediately quieted down, no longer daring to make a fuss. Witnessing the situation, everyone was extremely confused. What is happening? In the Imperial capital, he was known as the Tyrant, someone no one could defy. But since arriving here, he had always been led around by the nose. The Pendragon family is truly something. Ian immediately turned to Eren and said, Worm's White, let's talk. Just the two of us. We have something important to discuss. Eren, with a bored expression, remained silent. Ian began to provoke him. Are you afraid? In response to Ian's provocation, Eren's lips curled into a smirk as he replied, No, I'm just surprised to hear that nickname. I also want to talk to you, Eternal Prince. The two of them approached a large table, sitting across from each other while talking and drinking wine. Ian spoke first. You changed a lot. The last time I saw you, you were just a small, pale, weak, and fragile worm. That's why I decided to break off my sister's engagement. Eren, holding a glass of wine, responded, So that's what you decided? Whatever. Why are you here? Do you want to discuss the engagement again? Ian's eyebrows furrowed in annoyance as he said, There is no way I would entrust my sister to you, scum. Since I arrived here, I have not sensed any loyalty towards the royal family. Not even from that night. You, with your ties to the royal family, what is your intention in doing this? The Pendragon family does not hide under anyone's shadow, and I will only do what I want. That's all there is to it. Suddenly, Ian gathered his strength and lunged towards Eren with a punch. Eren calmly splashed his drink towards Ian, hitting him in the face. Quick as lightning, Eren charged forward, grabbing Ian's hand and using his elbow to strike Ian in the face. Ian's head snapped back, blood splattered from his nose. Unexpectedly, Ian regained his stance, grabbing Eren's arm and twisting him down onto the table. Eren's face was slammed onto the table, but he quickly grabbed Ian's hand, bringing him down, creating an arm lock while his legs pinned Ian's head. Ian was locked and panicked, struggling to free himself from the difficult position. At that moment, the silver dagger lay right next to Ian's hand, and he could use it to attack at any time. Eren also realized this, fixating on the dagger right before Ian's hand. However, Eren suddenly realized that without Ian attacking him with a knife, he would definitely let go and quickly retreat. Seeing Eren suddenly release him, Ian brushed back his hair and said, Why did you let me go? Eren calmly replied, It seems you don't want to give it your all. If you pick up that knife and try to stab me, you could escape with that move. Therefore, I will ask you again, why are you here? Both of them emitted a powerful aura to pressure each other. Ian smirked and laughed. Foo-foo. Ha ha ha. Eren stood shocked, staring at Ian, laughing uproariously. Ian cheerfully said, I see, you can push me to this extent. You really intrigue me. Eren looked at Ian with a confused expression as if looking at a monkey that had escaped its cage performing tricks. Ian, with a bold stance, extended his hand toward Eren and said, Will you join me? I will make you the backbone of the Empire, Eren Pendragon. Eren and Ian stood poised at the long dining table. Eren maintained his readiness to strike, while Ian had retracted his strength. He boldly invited Eren. Will you collaborate with me, Eren Pendragon? I need your resources as well as your military strength. Eren said nothing, simply looking at Ian and silently thinking. The situation has changed tremendously. The aura of the tyrant has disappeared, and his mood has changed as well. Eren slowly gathered his strength and said to Ian, An alliance? What do you mean by that? The two of them jumped to the ground. Ian replied, Right now, the royal family members are fighting to see who will become the heir. It's not just me, but also many other princes along with nobles secretly supporting them. So if there are no issues, I want the Pendragon family to stand alongside me. He paused and continued, Whether it is the Empire's gold and silver or recognition as an independent territory, I will reward you handsomely, I promise. Eren put his hands on his hips and listened silently as Anne explained. He intended to respond well, but suddenly stopped, lost in thought. If he becomes emperor? No, he is known by the name of the tyrant, but this seems to be his true nature. Why would someone wanting to become the next emperor intentionally create an impression of tyranny in the minds of others? This means Eren crossed his arms in front of his chest and asked, "You don't want to become the emperor, do you?" Hearing that, Hien was extremely surprised, widening his eyes as he turned back to look at Eren. Eren continued, "The image of a tyrant is just a facade, isn't it?" "What are you thinking?" "The reward doesn't matter. I won't accept an invitation from someone I can't trust." The two stared at each other, falling into silence. Ian, incredulous, said, "You know so much. You're the first one to understand my purpose, right after my sister." Ian was silent for a long time, and after a moment he continued, "I want to make my brother Cyan Aragon the emperor." Upon hearing this, Eren immediately asked, "Cyan, the great prince who was bedridden due to illness?" Ian turned around, his dark figure facing Eren, his hand clenched tightly, trembling, his voice filled with resentment. "Bedridden due to illness? You are wrong." He turned his head back to look at Eren, his face clearly showing resentment. "My brother was almost assassinated 3 years ago during the uprising in Sissa." Hearing these words, Eren was startled. "What?" I recounted, his voice filled with pain and trembling. "My brother can do anything. He is a kind and gentle person. He would have been a wise ruler. He said he would change this country. But," as Anne said this, Eren suddenly realized something and began to recall the past. 3 years ago, right? Sissak, the uprising. Suddenly, Eren spoke up. "I will accept your proposal. In return, he will tell me everything you know about that uprising." On the other side, a group of women were chatting among themselves. Princess Ingrid, with a disappointed and bored expression, remarked, "Is he married now?" The scene returned to the conversation between Eren and Ian. At this moment, the two were sitting regally at the table, slowly sipping fine wine and reminiscing about past stories. "And that is all I know about that," Ian said, concluding what Eren wanted to know. Eren fell into deep thought, looking at his reflection in the wine glass. It is not only the image of Eren in the present, but also reflects the shadow of Raven from a past life. At that time, I, a knight full of ambition, received a letter from the Lord of the Sissak territory. It seems that there was another purpose behind that action. Lost in the stream of memories, Ian suddenly spoke up, interrupting Eren's recollection. "The issue is, we don't know who instigated that rebellion." Eren responded immediately. "Could it be that the instigator is one of the other princes, those who are aiming for the throne? However, there are many princes and countless nobles supporting them. I can't be certain who among them is the instigator. Goofly, do you know any prince with that name?" Ian was taken aback by hearing that name. He tried to think and recall who it belonged to. Goofly? Hoofly, he's just the son of a concubine, possessing only a noble title. He has no real influence. But how do you know that name? "So there really is someone named Goofly," Eren said. "But he's just a person with a noble title. Why could he become emperor in just a few years? What is the background of that concubine? Where does Goofly's maternal family come from?" Baron Erlin, Ian replied. "She comes from a port city in Ray, and I heard my father say that her hometown is in." At this point, Ian suddenly stopped, as if he had just realized something. His expression turned to one of disbelief. "Sissak." Eren was also surprised to hear this, realizing that everything was gradually being deduced in the right direction. Ian jumped to his feet, his hands slamming down on the table as he angrily shouted, "Hey, how could that bastard do any of this? Even if he killed my brother, he will never be in line for the inheritance." Eren slowly put his hands on the table and stood up to reply, "No one can guarantee that, but everything has already been connected. I have realized that." Recalling the image of Raven from his previous life being mocked by the bearded man, Eren emanated the fierce aura of a mighty dragon. Han felt the terrifying presence like an enraged divine dragon and couldn't help but feel apprehensive. Remembering the previous battle with Eren, An thought to himself, "What is this aura? Everything I have seen until now. Is it still not the full extent of his power? I should have known this. What does he know? Who the hell is this guy?" Eren, with a terrifying presence, approached the window. Outside, White Dragon stood tall waiting. An, seeing White Dragon, exclaimed in fear, "It's White Dragon." White Dragon cast his gaze down at Eren. A powerful beam of light flashed, then quickly faded away. After the blinding light was the image of a girl with enormous wings. She flew to the window, standing opposite Eren, their auras identical, as if they were one entity. Eren called out, "Soul." The girl, with a proud expression, replied, "I can sense the dragon's aura very strongly. Are you all right, Ray?" The girl stepped down from the windowsill, delicately supported by Eren. Ian stood beside them, stunned at the sight, exclaiming, "It's so beautiful! Is that really the terrifying dragon? The Pendragon family are the contract holders of White Dragon. This girl is indeed the White Dragon of Eren Pendragon." Ian regained his composure, stepped forward gently, hands on his hips, saying, "I understand now. You must be a special character. Since you are recognized by me, I will trust your instincts." Eren simply smiled at Ian, while White Dragon maintained a cold expression as he looked at him. White Dragon turned to Eren and asked, "What happened?" Eren chuckled and replied, "Ha ha, a lot." Eren didn't continue to explain to White Dragon, but turned to call out, "Ian, come to the summer villa with us." "Huh? How?" "It's located on the outskirts of Sisek, along the Silversian coast. Let's lure our enemies out from there." And so the group set off towards the summer villa. Meanwhile, in the largest trading city of the Empire, the port city of Luce, the bustling scene under the golden sunlight and the calm blue sea was truly serene. At the Luce Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the guests there were drinking and discussing the situation of the nobles and the royal family. "Hey, have you heard of the news? The Pendragon family and the tyrant of the royal city, Prince Ian, have arrived at the nearby Silbul coast. Why are those two traveling together? I don't know, but isn't that kind of concerning?" The blonde guy casually said, "Of course, the dog of Luce, the governor Count Segunda, and Pendragon are like dogs and cats. After all, for the governor, Countess Helena." The black-haired guy across from him panicked and interrupted. "Stop! Don't say any more, you'll get punished." Continuing, the guy with slick-back hair took a sip of his beer and said, "But this year Luce is very busy. I heard that the Supreme Lord of the South, the ship of the Sea Dragon King Orangus, docked the day before yesterday." The other two seemed hesitant upon hearing him. Sea Dragon King. That's right, protected by the fierce Sea Dragon Viscula. Since when did he have the competitive power against the Emperor? That terrifying military strength, Orangus, it's quite frightening. The Southern warriors are really tough, right? Pendragon, the tyrant Ian, and Orangus. I truly hope nothing happens. While they were discussing animatedly, a voice nearby spoke up, "You don't need to worry about anything." The two quickly looked over at the person sitting alone across from them. "Chairman Ron, he really drinks a lot. This guy's name is Ron," and he said seriously, "When rich people gather together, we can expect business to increase many times over. That's all." The scene shifts to a clear beach with golden sand, soft sunlight filtering through the gentle breeze carrying the scent of the sea inland. The golden sand by the beach is the perfect place to relax during the sweltering summer. A blonde girl wearing a straw hat adorned with beautiful flowers called out, "Hey, Lord Eren, what do you think of my swimsuit? It was made by a famous tailor in the capital. It's designer wear." That girl is Princess Ingrid, looking beautifully alluring in her sexy swimsuit, showcasing her beautiful body. With a cheerful and expectant expression, she waited for Eren's happy reaction and compliments. Eren was lying down, visibly uncomfortable. Thankfully, his younger sister came to untangle this situation. Eren called out, "Brother, Lindsay is done changing too." Lindsay shyly said, "I haven't been to the beach in a long time." These two girls also had S-shaped figures. "We have to enjoy ourselves to the fullest. Miss Luna, come here quickly." Luna wore a seductive purple swimsuit. She shyly replied, "Yes." Princess Ingrid interrupted, frowned in annoyance at the three girls in front of her, and grumbled, "It's none of your business to butt in." Eren, with a gloomy expression, felt awkward about the current situation and thought, "Damn it, we came here to investigate the case in Sisek. How did everything turn out like this? Every little thing is that idiot's fault." Suddenly, someone ran up at high speed. He suddenly stopped, causing the sand to scatter under his feet, and called out, "Hey, beautiful ladies." It was Prince Ian, wearing only a pair of tight shorts to showcase his muscular body and 8-pack abs. He was very confident about his body and proudly said, "Forget about that innocent little worm and come talk to this great prince instead." Ian recalled the moment Eren invited him to go to Summer Island. He had firmly opposed the idea of traveling with just the three of them. "We're only going with 3 people? Don't be stupid. Bring the girls along too." The group of people looked at the confident idiot Ian in front of them with no emotion. Luna felt awkward and didn't know what else to do. Princess Ingrid crossed her arms over her chest, looking at Ian with a bored expression, while Lindsay, feeling embarrassed, covered her entire face with her hands. In contrast to the emotions of the 3 girls, Eren burst out laughing. "Ha ha, ha ha, ha. That really is a great swimsuit, Your Highness. So funny." Seeing Eren's reaction, Anne felt very defeated. His body trembled. Why was she laughing when she saw his beautifully sculpted martial arts body? Eren, feeling discouraged, walked away, sighing as he went. Eren, feeling energetic, asked, "Oh, where are you going? Are you going fishing or something?" Ian still stood behind, incredulous at Eren's reaction. Why? Eren took off his outer jacket, revealing his strong shoulders and great physique. The girls who got a glimpse of Eren's beautiful body felt fluttered, their faces turning completely red. Ian saw that the expressions of the other girls were entirely different when they looked at his body filled with envy. He was annoyed by the unfairness, pointing at the girls and saying, "Hey, why do I show more than he does?" Eren was too fed up with Ian's foolish behavior. His eyes drooped and he straightforwardly said, "Idiot." Suddenly something was falling from the sky, capturing his attention. Ha! A very large fish. No, it should be called a gigantic one, was falling from the sky into the sea. Its weight crashing down on the water caused the sea to surge towards the shore, creating a wave that knocked Eren's group down. The white dragon in human form slowly descended onto the back of the massive fish. With an impassive expression, the white dragon said to Eren, "I caught a fish." The fish that the white dragon referred to was not an ordinary fish, it was a giant whale. Yet, in the white dragon's words, it sounded like a very small fish. Eren sat up, resting his chin on his knee, his body drenched in seawater, and under the golden sunlight, his flawless physique and handsome features stood out even more. He said, "A fish, wow, for a dragon it might just be like a fish, a whale at that. Wow, how will the enemies react to this?" The scene shifts to the port city of Luz. Two people, Mark and Elkin, along with a green-skinned orc with a scarred eye named Karta, are immersed in the bustling atmosphere of the port. Mark Killian says, "But why has it turned into such an extravagant trip? Who would have thought Prince Ian would join us?" Karta, with a delighted expression, laughed heartily. He. Who cares about that? More importantly, look at this city. Warriors, warriors, so many warriors. He gazes around at the people here. Strong warriors appear everywhere, and he loves this. He is so excited that he drools and has to wipe his mouth with his hand. This is truly paradise. Yeah, I want to challenge them right now. I want to take them all down. Mark Killian is also at a loss for words with this guy. Now that I think about it, these guys came out of the forest because they crave battle. When he said he wanted to go to the harbor, I wondered what he was thinking. So this is the reason. Suddenly, something caught the attention of everyone there. Everyone turned their gaze towards a group of people, leading a winged creature. Elkin curiously asked, "What's happening?" A large green-skinned foot stepped forward. The group was not human, they were fierce orcs, leading a massive black eagle that was as formidable as they were. Karta questioned, "Orcs?" Mark Killian quickly confirmed, "That's Ratuan orc." "What is that?" From the distant southern lands, the Moltar Chaklago, the most brutal orc tribe. They do this for profit. As he spoke, his expression showed an indescribable fear. They are pirates. The leading orc, wearing 3 skulls around his neck, gleefully said, "We are just passing through, and the humans are already running in fear." The orc next to him enthusiastically chimed in, "Those weak, lowly creatures." They suddenly noticed the 3 of them. "Hey, look over there. Orcs, there are orcs. That's a type I've never seen before." The leader grinned with disdain. "Well, that guy definitely isn't from a very strong race because after all, he easily gave way to us. He seems to be a species that lives harmoniously with the lowly, weak humans." Karta, hearing the contempt aimed at him, shouted angrily, "What did you just say, you bastard? Want to go? I'll kill you right now." Mr. Mark, not wanting to attract trouble, quickly intervened. "You fool, stop it. Don't act like this in front of all these people. You are already a member of Pendragon." Hearing this, Karta snapped to attention. Reluctantly, but still trying to regain his composure to avoid acting rashly. Seeing Karta's submissive reaction, the orcs were even more amused, bursting into mocking laughter. Yo, no way, a proud orc submitting to a human? Incredible. This truly is the weakest orc species in the world. The 3 of them tried to calm each other down to avoid unnecessary conflict, ignoring the orcs' taunts as they walked away. Mr. Mark turned to look at his teammate and saw Elkin ready for battle. The sword. Okay, it's drawn. Karta was extremely angry, clenching his fist and declaring, "I will definitely kill him." As for Elkin, with a calm expression, but actions that were quite the opposite, he had already revealed his sword, ready to charge and strike down those orcs. Mr. Mark was also at a loss for words with these 2 warmongers. Why do I have to keep an eye on these dangerous guys? I just want to relax on the beach. However, despite this being a trading city, why were these half-hearted pirates able to walk around so openly? This city is hiding something. At this moment, the sun was gradually setting over the sea at Governor Luce's residence at the mansion of Count Secunda. Count Secunda was both watching the sunset and engaging in conversation. The emissary Eren Pendragon of the White Dragon and the Lion's son Ian Aragon have come for a retreat in the outskirts of Luce. Don't you think, Vincent? Vincent leisurely sat at the table, savoring fine wine while discussing. With a cold expression, he said, "Not only in the outskirts of Luce, but also in Sisset at the Sybil coast. Don't you think they've already realized the issue there in Sisek? If we investigate your highness, Baron Allen, and the connections of the Godfrey family, they will find out. If that's all there is to it. Setting Ian aside, Pendragon surely has no reason to get involved in that matter. Well, certainly that issue is not directly related to Pendragon, but we owe that family a significant debt. It's quite troublesome, those sly and sneaky individuals. Let's leave it to that person, the one controlling the pirates, the king in the shadows of Luce, the Dark King. The first day of the Pendragon family's summer vacation was held at Silbul's shore with a magnificent setting. At this moment, the white dragon was lounging on the back of a giant whale, watching everyone joyfully play below. The crowd was having a lavish party, cutting up the large whale, having a bonfire, eating, and singing. It ended with a sumptuous feast. Why is Karuta so angry? Well, it was earlier at the port, with all the whale meat. Elkin was diligently practicing his swordsmanship, gracefully maneuvering the blade. Griffin next to him was focused on eating meat. The night has fallen and the sea is strangely calm and peaceful. The bright moon shines behind the white clouds, along with the glimmering lights of the houses, creating a truly enchanting scene. At this moment, Eren sits cross-legged on the chair, enjoying wine and this marvelous view. Drinking because Luce never sleeps, of course. Another glass of wine is poured. That person approaches to talk to Eren, who is lost in thought. Let me sit with you. Prince Ian confidently holds his glass of wine as he walks toward Eren. Eren turns around to see Ian's expression and says, "You seem unhappy." Ian shows a look of discontent, immediately exclaiming, "Of course. I'm the one who invited those girls to relax. Why are you always like this?" He painfully recalls the moment where the beautiful girls ignored him and only paid attention to Eren, feeling quite resentful. Eren, with an annoyed expression, says, "Your usual behavior is not good. You always add unnecessary trouble. Your face is always one of disinterest. Could it possibly be you? I'm already married." Anne continues seriously, "But you don't seem that concerned about that concubine wife of yours." Suddenly, he thinks of something and exclaims, "Ah, could it be that you are with that dragon?" He was startled by the thought that Eren had feelings for White Dragon. Hearing this, Eren's expression clearly showed surprise. "Huh?" Seeing Eren's expression, Ian seriously said, "No, it's because when I saw you at the castle, when you were talking to White Dragon in her human form, you seemed different than usual." Eren hesitated for a long time, recalling his experiences with White Dragon. He remembered the time bonding with White Dragon, saying, "I am a Pendragon, but I am Raven." After finishing his recollection, he still hesitated for a moment and said, "It's not like that." But he looked at his reflection in the wine glass as if trying to see into his heart, confessing to himself, "Well, she is special." Hearing Eren's heartfelt words, Ian slowly approached him to share. "She is indeed beautiful on a different level, but I must decline, thank you. I only need one person. I don't care about your thoughts. The most important thing about these holidays is to investigate who is the mastermind behind the assassination of Cheyenne." Ian seriously discussed the matter. Prince Joffrey, his mother, Baroness Barlin, and Governor Luce and Gunda are relatives. If he is the mastermind behind the assassination, he must have done something when he heard that you, the prince, were nearby in Sisek, for example. Before finishing his sentence, Ian bluntly stated the purpose of Governor Segunda. "Hirikilni, is that what you mean?" Eren was quite surprised by Ian's speculation. Ian scoffed. "These bastards who disrespect the law, it's unbelievable that they would dare to do something like that." Eren also added, "You're not the kind to just sit back and wait, are you?" "Right, I'm looking forward to it. I'm ready to go crazy, but we still have to wait for the fish to bite." Ian eagerly anticipated, scoffing a bit. Then he took another sip of wine. His expression turned serious and contemplative. But he can figure out the enemy with only that information. He recalled when Eren unleashed his imposing presence over everyone, remembering Eren's words at that time when he mentioned the murderer of the late Prince Sion. "I know." Ian focused his gaze on Eren, confirming in his mind, "Is it your intuition? Or do you have something else? Exactly what do you see, Eren Pendragon?" The scene shifts to the underground world of Luce at a bar called the Killer Whale Island. The sign of the bar features a killer whale with two gashes forming an X shape right on its head. At the entrance of the bar, two orc guards stand watch, and it seems that no human dares to enter this establishment. Those outside discuss incredible news. But I'm really shocked. Yeah, who would think a human would enter the Killer Whale Island, a gathering place for orc pirates? I hope he doesn't get eaten. Upon entering the Killer Whale Island, just as the rumors outside suggested, there is indeed a human sitting here. He leisurely takes a large sip of his drink, his expression cold as he looks at the person across from him. The person across from him stands out with sharp teeth like those of a killer whale as he opens his mouth to speak. "Oh, you can drink." He is Tolio, the captain of the orc pirates. While talking, he caresses his extremely ferocious-looking face with his sword. Next to him is a green-skinned orc pirate, wearing a necklace of 3 skulls, who was previously sleeping. His hand was gently caressing the sword as he said, "So let me ask directly, what did the governor say?" The person opposite spoke plainly. "Deal with the snake and the cat." That's what he said. Tolio expressed with delight. "How bold, dealing with the prince as well. You really can't judge that old man by appearances." Well, I understand. If I remember correctly, 3 years ago it was the same in Sisek. He doesn't like to be scrutinized, especially by those from such a filthy place. Hearing his reprimand, Tolio said nothing but huffed. "You're pretty bold too, not just in front of an ordinary orc, but in front of me as well. You really are bold." Suddenly, he said loudly, "I like it, that attitude. Strong people are great, whether orc or human." The governor's subordinate handed Tolio a piece of paper. He said, "Here are the details. In 3 days, the snake and the cat will be invited to his house. The cat, the one eager to stand out, will get straight to the point with a bit of provocation." Tolio took the plan paper and happily said, Got it. So, the beloved Terran of the prince, this will be fun." He tightly grasped the piece of paper, emphasizing, "with the kitten." The human maintained an expressionless face, resting his chin on his hands and said, "Sorry, but may I ask you a personal question?" "Sure, what is it?" Tolio asked. "Are you a human?" Upon hearing this, Tolio froze for 5 seconds. He slowly opened his mouth and said, "Human, ha." Suddenly, the person in front of him felt a terrifying force emanating from him. A deadly aura radiated from his entire body as if he could shatter the whole place with just a slight movement. The person in front couldn't help but feel fear. "What's this? A killing intent. It's making it hard for me to breathe." He extended his hand towards the person in front of him and said, "What do you think?" The person in front was angry with himself and grabbed his hand. He swung his strong arm, sending that person tumbling through the air. In the urgent situation of about to fall from the sky, within just 2 short seconds, he managed to flip once and awkwardly bent down to land. Tolio cheerfully clapped the person on the back. Hey, you landed on your feet. Great job. You're better than I thought." His expression quickly returned to one of disdain as he draped an arm over the shoulder of the person in front of him. For one person, that's all. He changed his expression and turned to the sleeping green-skinned orc, calling out, Hey, Pact. It's been a while. Do you want to eat some orc meat?" The sleeping green-skinned orc Pact woke up excitedly. "Ha." Tolio continued to tease Pact's interest. "The orc meat has been marinating in the forest for a decade. I'm sure it's delicious." "That sounds great, hee. I happened to see it in the city today. I'm really curious." Pact drooled, wiping the saliva from his mouth. "Then, Junior, what will you eat?" "The orcs are mine." Tolio brimmed with bloodlust, confidently stating, "I will eat cats and snakes, killing them immediately. Then I'll skin the females and eat them. Ha. Eve exuded a strong aura of bloodlust, laughing loudly and shaking the entire room. The human before him became wary in the face of this scene. He is not a human. He is a monster. The second son of one of the 5 great duchies of the Empire, the Sea Dragon King Oranges. The Dark Emperor of Luce, Tolio Oranges. In a villa near the beautiful beach, an excited voice exclaimed, "What? We just received an invitation letter from Governor Luce, Count Secunda." The loud voice made Luna and Ingrid, who were sipping tea, turn to look. Lindsay and Eren, with eager faces and expectant eyes, stared at Mark. Eren excitedly asked, "To the ball?" Mark held the letter in his hand and replied, "That's right, all of us will go." The 3 of them chatted animatedly. Hearing this news, Eren exchanged glances with Ian. "Our opportunity has come." Ian looked at him and smiled. Now he will comply with what he wants for now. Helene, listening nearby, said worriedly, "Count Secunda." Noticing his mother mumbling the Count's name, Eren curiously turned to look. Seeing Helene's complexion worsen, Maya also looked at her with concern. Eren spoke up to reassure Helene. "Mom, please sit here and rest." Hearing Eren call her, Helene looked up at him. Eren smiled and said to Helene, "Because many things are about to happen here." Helene, touched, smiled gently at Eren and said, "Thank you, Eren." He stood up and called Sol, who was sitting on the rooftop. "Sol!" Seeing Eren calling her, Sol leaned down to look. Eren put his hands in his pockets, looked at Sol, and said, "Take care of my mother, or I will entrust the Duchess to you." Sol stared at him in silence. It was already late afternoon at the estate of Governor Luce, Count Secunda. All the nobles were gathering here, each dressed in extravagant formal attire. One excited person exclaimed, "Oh, it's such an honor to have you visit." The main guests of today's gathering were approaching from a distance. Eren's group stepped down from the carriage in all their splendor. Eren joyfully looked around, while Lindy seemed quite surprised by the scene before her. Ingrid waved to greet everyone. The 4 of them shone brightly, attracting a lot of attention. Someone couldn't help but compliment, "Wow, those young ladies are so beautiful." Eren and Ian were no less impressive. Their presence captured the attention of all the young ladies present. The ladies couldn't stop praising. So handsome, the prince and the duke. They were surrounded by guests, a crowd of people chatting incessantly. The friendly attitude, even though we are nobles, this is an honor that we do not deserve to receive. They will definitely meet the count. This is our first time meeting the young master, but they kept talking nonstop. At that moment, Carta could no longer hold back and shouted loudly, "Oi, Pendragon." Carta angrily stomped his foot on the ground, looked at Eren, and said, "This is completely different from what you told me." Carta's appearance made all the ladies frightened. They looked at Carta before them in panic. Carta, still annoyed, continued, "What the hell is this?" In contrast to Carta, Elkin simply remained silent, observing everything around. Carta, confused, asked, "Is this place just full of stuffed pinks? Aren't they just a bunch of tiny pests?" The more Carta spoke, the angrier he became. He turned to question Eren. "You said something would happen, so I came here all excited, but where are the warriors? I want to beat those orcs to a pulp." While Carta was passionately speaking, someone slowly approached them. Vincent swayed his glass of wine and smiled, saying, "Thank you all for coming, Pendragon and your companions." The appearance of the other person surprised everyone, causing them to turn and look. Vincent handed his glass of wine to a servant and smiled at Eren. He stepped in front of Eren and introduced himself. "I am a knight serving under the governor of Segunda. My name is Vincent." At this moment, Eren was still assessing him. Vincent politely bowed and greeted, "It is a great honor to meet you all, young Master Pendragon." When Vincent opened his eyes, the flow of aura appeared in his gaze. Eren stared intently into Vincent's eyes, astonished, and wondered to himself, "Is that the flow of aura?" He looked at Vincent and thought, "I heard that the flow of aura only appears in those who are skilled warriors with vast experience on the battlefield." Eren began to feel intrigued. "This is interesting. I should observe the situation a little longer." He turned his face away, trying to change the subject, and said, Seeing Eren's reaction was not what he had hoped for, Vincent grew serious. He then composed himself and cheerfully said, "Well then, please follow me." Eren's group quietly followed behind Vincent. Ian walked behind and began to observe Vincent. While watching, Ian noticed that his pace was always steady, and his posture showed no signs of slouching. Perhaps he can. Carta looked at Vincent and smiled with interest. Elke remained silent and said nothing. They were led to the ballroom, where their presence drew all the attention of the people. Eren beamed with delight. Ingrid waved cheerfully to everyone, while Ian and Eren followed behind the two girls. The governor stood in the middle of the hall and warmly welcomed them. He introduced himself. "I am the governor of Luz, Torio Segunda. It's been a while, hasn't it, Prince Ian?" Ian replied, "I think it has been about 3 years, hasn't it? You see, a lot has happened at the palace." Then the governor turned to greet Ingrid. "Princess Ingrid, it has been 5 years, hasn't it?" Suddenly, the governor's expression changed as he said, "You become even more beautiful." Eren noticed the oddness of the governor's words. After greeting Ingrid, the governor cheerfully inquired about Eren, "And this is Miss Eren. How have you become so beautiful?" The governor revealed a face similar to when he looked at Ingrid. Eren glanced at the governor with annoyance. He suddenly turned to Eren and said, "And now, the center of current attention, young Master Pendragon." The governor showered Eren with compliments. "You have formed a pact with the White Dragon, and it is truly remarkable that both the Orc and the Griffin follow your commands." Suddenly, the governor's expression changed. He asked, "However, where is the Duchess?" Eren calmly replied, "Her condition is not good, so she is resting at another villa with my remaining sister." The governor expressed great concern, saying, "That's unfortunate. I will send my personal physician to treat her." The governor continued, "Of course, I will also personally visit her." Upon hearing this, Eren turned his face to refuse, saying, "I appreciate your words, but please do not do that." Eren said seriously, "If a dangerous situation arises, things will get very complicated." After hearing Eren's words, the governor fell silent and said nothing more. To break the atmosphere, the governor spoke up, "I see. Then please enjoy tonight to the fullest." Ian sipped his drink, smiled, and said to Eren, "What a bastard making people disgusted, isn't he?" Eren simply responded briefly, "Yeah." Eren shared the information he knew about the governor with Anne. "I heard that a long time ago he proposed to the Duchess and was rejected. It's been 20 years and he's still holding a grudge." Eren turned to Ian and asked, "Besides that, who is that knight, Vincent?" Upon hearing Eren's question, Ian replied, "He is the most trusted aide of Count Segunda. He came to Luz 2 years ago and quickly became prominent. Rumor has it, he does dirty work for Count Segunda, or so I heard." Eren curiously asked, "Dirty work?" Eren became pensive, wondering, what's his involvement in the incident in Sisek? Anne turned to leave, but paused to advise him, "That's my hint. Now enjoy the party, but don't drink too much." After hearing Ian say that, Eren retorted, "I should be the one saying that." In a quiet place, a fearful voice echoed, "Why did you?" That person, filled with fear, grasped his weapon for self-defense. He cautiously stepped back, stammering, "Why have you come here in that outfit?" Tolio replied nonchalantly, "Because ever a party would be held." Pointing at the man, Tolio said, "You need to dress appropriately." With swift action, in the blink of an eye, Tolio sent the man to meet his maker. Tolio pointed at the man's corpse and said, "This is my outfit." Adjusting his hat, Tolio continued, "And I am dressed appropriately for the occasion." Excited, Tolio said to his subordinates, "So now let us enjoy ourselves to the fullest. Ha ha, ha ha." At the ball, the governor of Luce, Torio Segunda, looked at Eren and said that Eren Pendragon. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned to Vincent and asked, "What do you think, Sir Vincent?" The governor appeared incredibly elegant, holding a glass of wine while looking at Vincent. Vincent swirled the glass in his hand and replied, "When I released the flow of my aura, he could see it." However, he quickly looked away. Perhaps he was scared. The governor smirked at that, his tone laced with disdain. "It's basically just a tiny bub." Vincent looked at him and continued, "However, that brown-skinned man is undoubtedly very strong." Upon hearing this, the governor calmly shrugged and asked Vincent in return, "Compared to you, what level is he at?" Vincent closed his eyes, savoring the glass of wine in his hand as he said, "I don't know. Only a test of strength will reveal that." Vincent's expression suddenly grew more serious as he pondered. He recalled the first time he saw Elkin Isla and Carta. He guessed that the man must be a knight from Valvas, those foolish and reckless warriors. Vincent did not believe it. There was no way he would serve under such a weep-up. At that moment, the governor smirked and interrupted Vincent's train of thought. "Then I will leave that knight to you. If you can't kill him, it doesn't matter, because our reinforcements will arrive soon." Then the governor displayed a smug expression and said, "The son of the Sea Dragon King, a Black King, will take care of the cat and the snake." He gestured with his staff towards Vincent and asked, "You met him at that dump, right? The Black King?" The image of Tolio's bloodthirsty visage appeared in Vincent's mind, causing him to sweat with fear. Vincent set the glass down, his expression becoming serious. He looked at the governor and said, "He is a monster. No one can defeat him. At least humans cannot do that." The governor paid no attention to Vincent's warning. He simply laughed with a deep meaning and said, "Ha ha. If someone like you says so, then everything will go according to plan." The governor watched Vincent, who was deep in thought, and continued, "Among all the people I know, you are the smartest and most skilled." The governor turned to look towards the ball, a wicked smile on his face. He said, "If today goes smoothly, our plan will even be expanded and the progress will be accelerated further. When that time comes, I will give you the position you crave so desperately." Vincent closed his eyes and shook his head, replying, "I do not deserve such an honor, my loyal subject." The governor attentively looked at the guest in the lobby and calmly replied to Vincent, "It's all right. I am not bound by anything that happens here." He did not feel embarrassed at all and added, "I am simply a victim." At that moment, he looked no different from a wicked witch. The governor glanced at Luna's Brute talking among themselves and contemptuously said, "Just like those thoughtless fools down there." After saying this, the governor turned back to Vincent, his face still showing excitement. He asked, "Isn't that right?"